Chapter 1756. Good hubby. Mu Yaja raised his eyebrows. These 3 words were very pleasing to his ears. Originally, he was unhappy when she teased him, but because of these 3 intimate words, the corners of his lips uncontrollably curled up. He pulled her into his arms and continued the kiss that he didn't get to enjoy just now. With his lips on hers, he suddenly asked in a deep voice, "What kind of wedding gown do you like?" It was such a sudden question that she was a little stunned. "Little fool, I asked you what kind of wedding gown you like." He thought that she didn't hear him clearly, so he controlled his temper and repeated it again. "Wedding gown? Why are you suddenly asking about this? You're going to wear it when we get married." Mu Yaja looked at her as if she was a hopeless fool. "But don't you want to wear a wedding gown? Or do you not want to marry me?" "No." Yun Shirshir blushed and refuted, "I didn't mean that. I just think that your question is too sudden. Since I'm going to marry you, the wedding gown will naturally be indispensable. Your wedding gown needs to be custom made in advance, so I wanted to ask you, what kind of wedding gown do you like?" Mu Yaja explained. "Is a custom-made one especially expensive? That's not something you should be thinking about. You just have to think about what kind of gown you like and what kind of gown looks good on you." After all, they were only going to get married once in a lifetime, so it had to be grand. He also hoped that on that day, she would wear the most beautiful wedding gown in the world and appear in front of him. Yun Shirshir frowned. "Your question is too sudden. I haven't thought about it yet." She suddenly looked up and asked, "What about you? Do you have a wedding gown you like?" Mu Yaja couldn't help but laugh. "Stupid. I'm asking you. Why are you asking me instead? You're the one wearing the wedding gown, not me." Yun Shirshir felt wronged. "That's true, but your opinion is more important. Although I'm the one wearing the wedding dress, I hope you like it." Mu Yaja smiled softly and teased her, "As long as you like it, I like it. I'm marrying you as a person, not a wedding dress." She didn't say anything, but her heart was filled with sweetness. Let me think about it. In fact, she used to have many beautiful dreams for weddings. Her biggest hope was to dress up grandly and wear a beautiful wedding dress to marry the man she loved. But when the day really came, she couldn't say for a moment what style she liked. She hadn't studied it at all. There are a few types of wedding dresses. One type is Chinese, such as the qipao or the hanfu. It combines many elements of classical culture. Some are more retro and some are more modern. The other one is Western style, but there are many styles of Western-style wedding dresses. They are very complicated, and you will be dazzled by them. Yun Shirshir was stunned by his words. "You seem to know a lot about wedding dresses." "Not really, but I went out of my way to find out more." Although he said that, she knew in her heart that he was paying special attention because of her. Yun Shirshir's ears were a little red. Chapter 1757. There are Western-style wedding gowns. Some are retro and gorgeous, some are graceful and elegant, and some are noble and elegant. The custom-made wedding gowns will all be extremely luxurious. It all depends on what you choose. But as long as you wear it, no matter what style it is, I will like it. Women were naturally picky when it came to wedding gowns. No matter which woman it was, they all hoped to be the most beautiful bride in the world on their wedding day. Yun Shirshir was no exception. But there were very few men who paid so much attention to the details of their wedding. There were also very few men who were so patient that they would go through every style of wedding gown. She remembered one of her colleagues. When she was nearing her wedding day, she excitedly took her fiancé to the bridal shop to choose a gown. However, she tried on one gown after another. She patiently tried on a few different styles of wedding gowns and asked her fiancé to make a judgment. But in return, her fiancé looked at her impatiently. He said, "It's just a wedding. Is there a need to go through such a complicated process? The wedding gown is just a formality. It's worn during the wedding. You won't wear it again after wearing it once. Is there a need to choose so carefully?" In front of so many people, her colleague felt so wrong that her eyes turned red. They parted on the spot on bad terms. If a custom-made wedding gown is expensive, there's actually no need to do so. I think I look good in anything. What's important is that you like it, understand? Mu Yaja emphasized this point. There's no need to save money for me. It's only once in a lifetime. How can I let you suffer? Yun Shirshir smiled sweetly, but she felt as sweet as honey. She wanted to say, Mu Yaja, how can you dote on me so much? You're going to spoil me so much that I don't know the immensity of heaven and earth and forget myself. But when the words reached her mouth, she swallowed them back down. Wasn't it a blissful thing to be doted on by someone? Hence, she said, actually, I like quite a lot of styles. I've seen a wedding dress show before, and I really like a Western-style wedding dress that incorporates classic Chinese elements. The wedding dress she had her eyes on was not a traditional Chinese dress. It was an off-shoulder wedding dress with a long hemline that reached the ground, like a charming lily in full bloom. The neckline and cuffs were designed with Chinese Sioux embroidery. It had both the elegance and romance of French and the unique charm and elegance of the East. It was very beautiful. Since you have an idea, that's good. When the time comes, I'll contact a few wedding dress designers for you. You can tell them your idea and see how they design it. After the design is done, you only need to be responsible for choosing. They were going to custom make a wedding dress for her. Yun Shirshir was so touched that she didn't know what to do. She just nodded with a silly smile. All right. At night, she sorted out the invitations that she had yet to send out. Her gaze suddenly fell on one of the more exquisite invitations. On the name of the guest, she neatly filled in the 2 words, Gong Jie. Would he come to her engagement party? She really wanted to receive his blessings. At the thought of this, Yun Shirshir picked up her cell phone and called Gong Jie. The call went through very quickly. Xiao Jie, where are you? Sis, what's the matter? Yun Shirshir said, I have something for you. There was a moment of silence on the other end. Then a cold voice came through. Is it an invitation? Yes, it is. Chapter 1758. Upon hearing this, Yun Shirshir couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. She had thought that this was an excuse for him not to attend the engagement ceremony. Hence, the loneliness in her heart was reflected in her tone of voice. Xiao Jie, are you still unwilling to attend my engagement ceremony? After 15 years of separation, she cherished the sibling relationship that she had lost and regained. But at the same time, she also hoped that her happiness would be blessed by the person closest to her in the world. Gong Jie was as important to her as Little Munchkin. Sis, I have something urgent to attend to in America. I just got off the plane and am not in the country. After a pause, Gong Jie continued, as for the engagement ceremony, can you give me some time to consider it? Gong Jie sounded a little helpless on the other end of the line. Yun Shirshir was stunned for a moment. Then she smiled a little dejectedly. Xiao Jie, I won't force you or make things difficult for you. Whether you come or not, I will reserve a place for you. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. He didn't say a word, and she didn't know what he was thinking. Suddenly, Gong Jie said, Okay, got it. After hanging up the phone, Yun Shirshir sighed. Even though Gong Jie had promised her well, she didn't know if he would come on that day. Now that he was overseas, she was afraid that this meticulously prepared invitation wouldn't reach him. Yun Shirshir pursed her lips. She opened the drawer and put the invitation inside. The next day, Mu Yaja sent someone to send Yun Shirshir to the set and then went to the office. When Yun Shirshir returned from the set, the chauffeur sent by Mu Yaja sent her to the bridal gown shop. Lover, a professional custom-made gown. Even though it was just an engagement ceremony and there was no need to wear a wedding gown, this gown was still necessary. Mu Yaja had left the meeting early and was waiting for her in the shop. He had considered things more thoroughly, so he had arranged things very carefully. As soon as Yun Shirshir stepped into the store, she was invited into the VIP room by the manager of the dress hall. First, she was measured. After taking the measurements, the manager was surprised and exclaimed, Miss Yun, your figure is the golden ratio. A figure like yours is a classic clothes hanger. You can do any style of gown. For a moment, she could not tell if he meant what he said or if he was just being polite, so she replied politely, Hee hee. You flatter me. I'm not flattering you. I'm speaking from the bottom of my heart. When we make custom-made gowns, we pay the most attention to the proportion of the body. The more perfect a person's figure was, the better they looked in clothes. The fewer restrictions there are. At the side, a few shop assistants also surrounded her and took some measurements for her. For example, the size of the wrist, the size of the shoulder, the size of the shoulder. Lover was a famous custom-made gown shop in the capital. Many celebrities and socialites chose their gowns from this shop. The reason why they were so famous in the industry was because of 3 words: exquisite, exquisite, and exclusive. Every gown was handmade and the size were exactly the same. Even the slightest mistake of 0.1 millimeters was not allowed to happen. Hence, the gowns made by this shop never failed to fit. They were all custom-made. Chapter 1759. There was only one ready-made dress per design. Once the customer picked the dress, it would no longer be sold. Among the upper-class socialites, including the A-list celebrities in the entertainment industry, no matter if they were attending important business events or public events, walking the red carpet, or filming a blockbuster, no one would be indifferent to wearing the same dress as another person. It would be quite embarrassing. It was not scary to wear the same dress, but it would be embarrassing to see who was uglier. In order to avoid such embarrassment, everyone would want to wear the only custom-made dress. Therefore, it could be said that every dress from Lover was custom-made and one of a kind in the world. Of course, the price of the gowns in this shop was naturally not cheap. After taking measurements, Xianxia walked out of the shop. She saw Wuxia sitting on the sofa and flipping through the album. She walked over and sat beside him to take a look. She saw that he was holding the works of Lover's top designers. Some of them were concept drawings, while others were samples that had already been made. Of course, the so-called album was different from the pictures that could be found on the internet. The concept drawings were all meticulously designed, polished, harmonized, and rendered. Every detail was vividly displayed. As for the final product, every detail, including the design of the cuffs, collar, and waist, was accurately photographed in high definition. It was for the customers to read carefully. As for the fabric, there were some samples at the end of the album so that the customers could feel the texture with their own hands and choose the material that they liked. There was a thick stack of album in front of Wuxia. It was very thick and very heavy. Xianxia held the album in her hands. It was so heavy that she frowned. "Did you pick anything?" She looked up and asked him as she flipped through the album. Wuxia frowned and shook his head. He was picky and paid attention to details. Originally, he did not want to participate in the process of choosing the dress. However, she said that she hoped that he would like the dress that she wore. Since that was the case, he would personally participate in the process of choosing the dress. Since he entered the shop, he had already flipped through 3 albums. However, there were only a few designs that he liked, but he was not satisfied with any of them. Among the few models that he liked, there were also many details that he was not satisfied with. However, they weren't in a hurry. If there wasn't anything they were satisfied with, they could continue to choose. There had to be one that both of them liked. If there really wasn't any, it wouldn't be a problem to get the designer to rush out the design. After Xianxia sat down, the manager led a few designers over. Xianxia was not a professional when it came to choosing a wedding dress, so the manager specially brought a few designers to explain to her. Formal attire might seem simple, but when it was worn on the body, the first thing that was important was its beauty, the second was its material, and the third was its comfort. Some low-quality gowns did not fit well. Some people with sensitive skin would have an allergic reaction when they touched some low-quality fabric. A few designers flipped through the album and showed it to her and Wuxia as they explained it in detail. At first, Xianxia only understood half of it, but later on, she gradually understood some of the details. Finally, after some discussion, the two of them decided on a set of formal attire. Chapter 1760. A red Chinese-style gown was more festive. On this point, the two of them were surprisingly in agreement. However, this gown was not a classic one. It was stylish and beautiful. Xianxia took a liking to it at first glance. Wuxia gave the manager a deadline. As the date of the engagement was approaching, the gown had to be made as soon as possible. The manager repeatedly promised that the gown would be delivered before the engagement under the condition that the quality and quantity of the gown were guaranteed. Yun Shishir sent out the last few invitations. Of course, Xiang Yu, Yun Qingmiao, and Xiang Yu also received an invitation. The invitations were exquisitely made, and each one was handwritten by Yun Shishir. The date and place of the engagement were written in it. It also stated that 2 nights before the engagement, Mu Yaja would use his private jet to bring the groom's and bride's invited guests to the island. The moment Yun Qingmiao received the invitation and saw the envelope, she was dumbfounded. Moms? Who exactly is Yun Shishir's man? He actually has his own private jet. Yun Qinli was also in disbelief. Gosh, I used to think that Yun Shishir's man could only be considered as Yin Fu, but now it seems that his identity is definitely not ordinary. He actually has his own private jet. How rich must he be to own such a thing? In their eyes, only the super rich could afford a private jet. What they did not know was that Mu Yaja had a total of 5 private jets under his name. 2 of them were especially luxurious VIP jets, which were used to pick up important VIPs during business negotiations. You are one of the private jets that will be used for the engagement. Yun Qingmiao was so jealous that she could die. A few days ago, she had just seen the trailer for the movie, The Green Apple, on TV. At first, when she saw the beautifully edited promotional video on TV, she felt that it looked familiar. At first, she thought that it was just a coincidence. Later, the movie channel specially broadcasted the special feature and invited the director and the various main cast members to do an exclusive interview. They also edited some of the movie's highlights. When Yun Shishir appeared on the screen, her name was clearly written at the bottom of the screen. Only then did Yun Qingmiao believe that her distant cousin was actually a superstar. Yun Qingmiao was not a fan of celebrities, but Yun Qinli especially liked to watch idol dramas. Naturally, like many young girls, she especially admired Gu Xingzi. When she saw Yun Shishir and Gu Xingzi smiling as they sat together for an interview, she went into a frenzy. Yun Shishir was actually a superstar? Moreover, she and Gu Xingzi had starred in a teen movie. What's more, the main cast of this movie was a gold medal team. Not only that, when she searched for Yun Shishir's name, a few topics popped up. Surprisingly, one of them was a popular reality TV show, The Love Diary. She stayed up all night and watched all 3 episodes of the show. For 3 whole days, she could not sleep in peace. She was excited. She was excited. She was excited because she did not expect that her beloved idol would be so close to her one day. Chapter 1761. Yun Qinli especially wanted Gu Xingzi's autograph. If there was a chance, she could use Yun Shishir to get to know Gu Xingzi in person. This was something she dared not even dream of. If she could use Yun Shishir to enter the entertainment industry, would she not be able to get closer to her idol? Yun Qinli was so delusional that she did not even have the mood to look for a job. All she wanted was to find an opportunity to enter the entertainment industry. Yun Qingmiao, on the other hand, did not chase after celebrities, but unlike her sister, she harbored another thought in her heart. It turned out that Yun Shishir's fiancé was so rich. Not only was he handsome and tall, but his family background was also so superior. How exactly did Yun Shishir manage to hook up with such a perfect man? If she had such a boyfriend, she would wake up laughing even in her dreams. Xiang Yu, on the other hand, did not pay attention to these. The only thing she was concerned about was that since Yun Shishir was a celebrity and had such a rich fiancé, her family background should be extremely superior. She was focused on scheming. If she could hook up with Yun Shishir's family, given her relationship with Yun Shishir, they could be considered distant cousins. With such a rich cousin, she would not have to worry about glory and wealth for the rest of her life. In short, the 3 mother and daughter each had their own ulterior motives and different ambitions. Yun Qinli gave Yun Shishir a call and indirectly asked her how she could enter the entertainment industry and become a celebrity like her. How could Yun Shishir not understand the hidden meaning in her words? Alas, she was too busy preparing for the engagement, so she did not have the time to care about her. She gave a perfunctory reply and did not say much more. Yun Qinli was not discouraged, though. She thought to herself that she would discuss this matter with her after the engagement ceremony. She wanted to see if she could use her connections to open a back door for her to sneak into the production team and play a role. Who knew she might become famous overnight? There was no telling. She might even become more famous than Yun Shirshir. Yun Qinli was so delusional that she could not settle down for a few days. The engagement ceremony was held on an island because Mu Yaja had considered many aspects before making this decision. Firstly, there was a castle on the island. After fetching the family and friends, the 2-day and 2-night celebration banquet would be relatively convenient, and there would be a private jet to shuttle them back and forth. More importantly, his wife had always dreamed of having a beach wedding. She had never mentioned these dreams but had written them down in her diary. He took a glance at it and memorized it in his heart. Although it was just an engagement ceremony, it was still a dream come true. He hoped that the engagement ceremony would be grand, but at the same time, it had a confidential atmosphere. There weren't many guests, but they were all important guests with deep connections. If they held an engagement ceremony on an island, not only would they not be disturbed, they could also ensure the safety of these guests. One had to know that many of the invitees to the engagement banquet were international politicians, even aristocrats and celebrities. They were the leaders of various countries. In 2 weeks' time, the arrangements on the island were completed. Mu Yaja had invested a lot of manpower and energy in this aspect. Chapter 1762. His personality dictated that as long as he was involved in something, he would naturally strive for perfection and strive for perfection. He did not like things with flaws, not to mention this was such an important moment in his life. He would not allow any mistakes in any part of the process. On the day of the wedding, he even sent out strict security. Even though it was on an island, he had to be alert to any possibility of an emergency. The venue was heavily guarded. Without an invitation, no one could enter. 2 nights before the engagement ceremony, Yun Shirshir was suddenly so nervous that she could not sleep well. Mu Yaja had already flown to the island. The next day he would send out a private jet to pick up all the guests. As for her, as the bride-to-be, another private jet would be sent to pick her up. She could not help but be curious and asked why. Mu Yaja mysteriously said, "You are my fiancé." Of course, you have to maintain a sense of mystery. Yun Shirshir was amused by him and did not know whether to laugh or cry. Lying on the bed, she tossed and turned restlessly. Hugging the pillow, she recalled everything that had happened between her and Mu Yaja ever since they met. Every scene flooded into her mind, but it gave her the illusion that it was a lifetime ago. Fate was unpredictable. Perhaps she was born lucky to have met him and used up all her life's luck. When they first met, he was her employer. What about her? She was merely his surrogate mother. When they first met, they were still strangers. Then, she gave herself to him without any reservations. Out of helplessness, that was also the lowest point of her life. However, at that time, she did not expect that the man she was so afraid of that night would actually be her husband in the future. Fate was something that could not be explained clearly. However, fate was like this. If there was a slight mistake at every step, they could miss each other. Yun Shirshir was sincerely grateful that they were able to come this far. The engagement ceremony was imminent. Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen were also excited. Xiao Yichen complained that he wanted to be the microphone, but Yu Yu rejected him. Idiot! It's an engagement party, not a wedding. There's no need for a flower girl. Mommy is not wearing a wedding gown. When Xiao Yichen heard this, he started chattering again. I thought it was a wedding. When is Mommy and Daddy's wedding? Yun Shirshir smiled. I haven't decided on a date yet. Why, Xiao Yichen, are you that impatient? Xiao Yichen said matter-of-factly, of course. All I want is to see the day Mommy marries Daddy. Because on that day, Mommy will definitely be very happy. I want Mommy to be happy. Xiao Yichen's words made Yun Shirshir's heart feel sweet again. Yu Yu said coldly from the side, this bewitching potion is really good. Even if Mommy gets married, Mommy will still love me the most. You're not allowed to steal my Mommy. Xiao Yichen pouted and said, what do you mean I can't snatch your Mommy away from you? Mommy is also mine. It's also mine. The two little guys did not agree and started to pinch each other again. Each of them hugged one of Xianxia's arms and acted coquettishly. Xianxia did not know what to do, but she did not know whether to laugh or cry. With two children at home, she really could not have a moment of peace. The next day, Wuxia's private jet arrived as scheduled. Xianxia and the two little guys boarded the same jet. The other jet was specially used to pick up the guests from both parties. There was something that had to be mentioned. Chapter 1763. His consideration was that the guests invited by the man were all wealthy and respectable. He was afraid that the mother-daughter trio would say something inappropriate regardless of the occasion, which would embarrass everyone in public and embarrass them. He did not want to ruin Xianxia's important moment at such an important occasion. However, he still invited them. If he did not invite them, it would not be right. If word got out, people would gossip. In the end, it was Wuxia who spoke. It was not a problem to invite them. At most, they would be separated from some important guests in two cabins. During the engagement party, they would be arranged as far away as possible. Wuxia also knew that Xiangyu and her daughter were not good people. They did not know how to control their words. But if he did not invite them, it would not be right. Hence, he made such arrangements. Xianxia invited a few friends. Among them, those who were on good terms with her colleagues were invited. Xiaoxue, who was her best friend and future bridesmaid, was also invited. As for Jiang Li, she was the only one who was invited among all her classmates. The rest of them were all close friends of his. When it was time to board the plane, Xiaoxue was used to such situations, so she remained calm. Jiang Li, on the other hand, was completely shocked. When she was traveling, she had also taken a plane, but she had never been on such a luxurious plane. The solid wood seats, the luxurious decor, and the luxurious furnishings in the cabin all showed the style of a noble. She even dared not sit down. More importantly, the guests invited by the groom were all dignified. Some of them had even been seen on important international news. They seemed to be very influential. There were bodyguards wearing sunglasses 3 meters away from them. They did not allow outsiders to get close. What was even more surprising was that a few politicians from a certain country were also invited. A few international politicians and members of a certain country's royal family, as well as the Prime Minister and President of Country X, were allocated to the VIP cabin. The important politicians and celebrities sat in a suite. Xianxia's guests sat in the same cabin as some business celebrities. Even so, Jiang Li still felt quite pressured. Most of the guests who were sitting in the same cabin were people with great backgrounds, and their names could be called out. Even if he hadn't appeared on TV, there were special introductions in some financial newspapers. One of them seemed to be the CEO of a large corporation. All the famous people on the Forbes list were among them. Sitting among them, she could not help but feel the aura of these big shots in the business world. It was as if Mount Tai was pressing down on her. It was so oppressive that she could not breathe. Even if she was just casually drinking some tea, she had to pretend to be a lady in order to feel that she could adapt to such a scene. But at the same time, he felt that she was imitating others and making a fool of herself. It was neither fish nor fowl. In short, no matter what she did, she felt out of place with the nobles of this class. The huge difference between them made her unable to adapt quickly. When a person was in a high position, their temperament would be completely different from ordinary people. Moreover, these big shots at the pinnacle all had extraordinary backgrounds and were especially noble. Jiang Li resisted the urge to scream and sat in the same place, trembling with fear. She held Xiaoxue's hand tightly. She had not seen Xiaoxue for a long time. The reason she was invited this time was because they were classmates. After all, they had been classmates for 4 years. Jiang Li had been good to Xianxia, and Xianxia was grateful to her. Therefore, she made an exception and invited her from among her classmates. Chapter 1764. Due to that class reunion, everyone had parted on bad terms. She thought that her relationship with Xianxia would end just like that. When Jiang Li received her invitation, she was more touched than surprised. She then seriously prepared a 4-digit red packet. This was already considered a decent amount among the commoners. However, Compared to Mu Yaja's guests, it was not even worth a mention. To put it bluntly, a private jet flight to a private island for a vacation was not even worth this bit of money. She could not help feeling guilty at first, but when Xiao Shui found out about it, she said, "It's fine as long as you have the intention. Will Xirsher care about this bit of money?" Only then did she feel more at ease. Of course, she still knew her limits and knew to save some face for Yun Xirsher. Even though she was shocked, she still pretended to be calm in the face of such an occasion. Yun Yeqing and Yun Yeho were dressed especially well for the engagement ceremony. They had prepared 2 suits, but when they boarded the plane and saw the various celebrities in the cabin, they could not help but feel a little oppressed. This feeling was indescribable. It could only be said that their status was still in a different world from Mu Yaja's social circle. Because of this, he could not help but feel worried for Yun Xirsher. Since ancient times, marriage was about matching the social status of the 2 families. Of course, it did not mean that the 2 families had to be of the same status, but at the very least, it could not be so different. One was a commoner while the other was from the upper class. The difference between them could not be summed up in a few words. He was afraid that Yun Xirsher would inevitably suffer after marrying into the Mu family. Most of the rich and powerful would not fancy Yun Xirsher's family background. This was what he was most worried about. In the end, due to his nervousness, Yun Yeqing had no choice but to bring his younger brother to the same cabin as Xiang Yu and her daughter. The moment Xiang Yu saw Yun Yeqing, she hurriedly pulled him to the side and said, "Brother Cheng, you're here. You're being a little unkind in this matter. How could your daughter be so capable to hook you up with such a rich husband? You've been hiding it from us all this time." Yun Yeqing was stunned. Xiang Yu couldn't help but ask, "What is the background of Xirsher's fiancé? From the looks of it, they've even sent out a private jet. You must have a lot of money, right?" Yun Yeqing knitted his brows in disgust at her question. "I don't care about Xirsher's fiancé's family background. I only care about whether he loves Xirsher, whether he dotes on Xirsher, and whether he treats Xirsher well. I don't care about anything else." "How can this be?" But Xiang Yu didn't agree. "He is your son-in-law. You don't even know him well. Why do you care about him?" Then, she guessed mysteriously, "I think his background is not simple. How could he afford such a luxurious private jet if he wasn't a billionaire? Brother Cheng, if you ask me, Xirsher is really not bad at all. With her finding such a rich husband for you, you won't have to worry about your wealth in the future." Chapter 1765. Yun Yeqing gave her a lukewarm smile and glanced at her expressionlessly. "I don't care about these things. Xirsher being able to find a man who loves her and their children being able to spend the rest of their lives together is the most important thing. Everything else, be it rich or poor, is secondary. So, look at you. You have the life of luxury, so why are you so unappreciative?" She was exasperated at his failure to live up to her expectations. Yun Qingmiao, who was curious, also came forward and inquired, "Uncle, Xirsher is really lucky. She can find such a handsome and rich husband." One can't be too worldly when looking at things and people. When 2 people are together, the most important thing is their feelings. Other material conditions are not important at all. Yun Yeqing did not take this matter seriously. He had never thought of the glory and wealth he could enjoy in the future if Yun Xirsher and Mu Yaja were together. To put it bluntly, if Yun Xirsher led a good life, he was willing to work harder for the rest of his life. That was what he really thought, and that was what he did. After returning to the capital, he immediately found a job to take care of Yun Yeho while working. While he still had some stamina, he could work a job and earn some money to reduce her burden. Alas, neither Xiang Yu nor Yun Qingmiao thought the same. To them, his words sounded a little pompous. Yun Qingmiao smiled and said, "Uncle, what are you saying? If her fiancé isn't rich, will Xirsher still fancy him? Isn't she with him so that she can have a better life in the future? If she marries such a rich man, she can live a comfortable and carefree life as a rich madam for the rest of her life. She doesn't have to work or earn money as she has a husband to support her. As long as she works hard to give birth to his children, her life in the future will be very comfortable." Xiang Yu also sighed at the side. "That's right. Xirshi's good fortune was not something that could be obtained through envy. If possible, let Qingmiao and Qinli visit Xirshe and learn from her. In the future, they can also find me 2 rich husbands. That would be great. At this point, Yun Yeqing did not want to talk to them anymore. Some things can't be asked for. After a pause, he reminded them again. Xiangyu, Qingmiao, Qinli, there are a lot of influential people at this engagement ceremony. When the time comes, remember not to speak carelessly. Be careful with your words and actions, and at least know your limits when you speak. Hearing this, Xiang Yu's expression changed, and displeasure appeared in her eyes. But, Brother Cheng, what are you talking about? Xirshe just got engaged, and you're already setting up the rules. What, are you afraid that the 3 of us will embarrass Xirshe? Don't you think it's inappropriate to say that? Yun Yeqing thought in dissatisfaction, it's precisely because the 3 of them are unreliable in their words and actions. Otherwise, why would I give them such advice? Xiang Yu only took it that he was being arrogant in front of them. His daughter had married into a rich family, yet he was starting to despise them for being poor and lacking in class. It was just marrying into a rich family. Did he have to be so lofty in his words? His pretense was quite impressive. Wasn't he just afraid that they would embarrass themselves in public? Did he have to speak like this? Chapter 1766. Sigh. I'm just worried. To be honest, most of the guests invited by the groom this time are people of status. I don't dare to speak carelessly for fear of being laughed at. So just keep your mouths shut when the time comes. Unwillingly, Xiang Yu agreed. However, she had another thought in mind. Once Yun Yeqing was gone, she immediately whispered to Yun Qingmiao, "Did you hear that? All the guests this time are people of status. Aren't you going to let me seize this opportunity?" Although Yun Qingmiao pretended to be calm on the surface, she could not hide the excitement in her heart. She held her mother's hand tightly, clearly at a loss for what to do. "Mom, in that case, are all the people who came to the wedding banquet this time influential people?" Her mother snorted. "What do you think? Most of them are either rich or powerful. Didn't you hear what your uncle said earlier? He said that many of the guests at this engagement party are people of status and influence. Xirshe's fiancé is so influential that he even owns several private jets. How can the guests he invited be third-rate people?" Yun Qingmiao was elated to hear that, but she was full of expectations for the upcoming engagement party. She longed to meet a person of status and power like Mu Yaja. He was tall, handsome, and powerful. Most importantly, he seemed to have inexhaustible wealth. Perhaps it was because he was used to living a hard life. He had never enjoyed a good life since he was young. When he was young, he went to work in the factory. In the electronics factory, day after day, year after year, he worked 12 hours a day and only had 2 days of rest a month. Yet, he could only earn a salary of a little more than 3,000 yuan. At first, she was quite satisfied with this salary. 3,000 yuan was considered a good income in the countryside. However, there was no harm in comparison. When she followed her mother into this bustling metropolis, she saw real estate with an average price of tens of thousands, luxury cars that easily cost hundreds of thousands, mobile phones that cost a few thousand, luxury goods that cost tens of thousands, bags, lipsticks, cosmetics. To her, almost everything was full of impactful temptation. She suddenly felt that a monthly salary of 3,000 yuan was nothing. Living in such a huge international city, even if it was only a few tens of thousands of yuan, it might be difficult to make ends meet in a month. But if she could marry a rich husband, that would be a different story. She could also afford to drive a luxury car, live in a villa, buy Hermes bags that cost hundreds of thousands, and buy high-end cosmetics. She could walk through the bustling department stores and buy whatever she liked without hesitation. She yearned for such a carefree life. Therefore, she was extremely envious of Yun Xirshe. However, it was important to know one's own limitations. Yun Qingmiao was well aware that her looks could not compare to Yun Xirshe's. Perhaps, it was hard to meet a man as noble as Mu Yaja, but she did not have to be too handsome or tall. As long as he had money, power, and could satisfy her material needs, that was enough. Speaking of which, this was all thanks to Yun Xirshe. If she had not been invited to her engagement party, she might not have had such an occasion and opportunity to try her luck. Chapter 1767. After she arrived in the capital, she caught up with the latest trends. She used communication devices and even learned how to use Weibo. She followed Gu Xing's account on Weibo and saw a lot of intimate interactions between him and Yun Shishir. She was very excited. It seemed that the two of them had a good relationship. While she was jealous, she was also looking forward to seeing if Gu Xingze would attend the engagement party. If he did, she wanted to sit next to him. Even if she could only look at him from a close distance, she would be very satisfied. Of course, these were just wishful thinking. If he did not show up, then she would only be disappointed. However, Yun Qinli was destined to be disappointed this time. Yun Shishir did not invite Gu Xingze. Actually, she had wanted to invite Gu Xingze, but she gave up the idea after considering Mu Yaja's feelings. If he didn't like someone, she would consider his feelings and keep a little distance. Yun Shishir's plane arrived at the island first. After the plane landed on the tarmac, bodyguards escorted her all the way to the castle. However, the interesting thing was that after she got into the car, the bodyguard covered her eyes. While she was feeling uneasy and suspicious, the bodyguard said that it was the boss's idea. The boss was probably referring to Mu Yaja. What was this guy trying to do by pretending to be mysterious? Yun Shishir was puzzled, but she did not say anything and allowed them to cover her eyes. When she got out of the car, she was carefully led into the castle. Just as she entered the castle, the crisp sound of high heels hitting the marble floor reminded her of where she was. "Can I take it off now?" she asked softly. She could not see anything in front of her, and this made her feel very uneasy. The cold and respectful voice beside her said, "Sorry, please wait for a moment. Follow me upstairs." Suddenly, he reminded her, "Be careful of the stairs." With the help of the bodyguards, she was led all the way to the 4th floor. In a daze, she did not know how many flights of stairs she had taken. Finally, she stopped in front of a door. After the bodyguard sent her into the room, he quietly retreated, closed the door, and left. Yun Shishir waved her hands in the air for a long time before she took off the blindfold in a daze. However, when she opened her eyes, she was instantly mesmerized by the luxurious and elegant decor in front of her. Inside the huge room, the ceiling was more than 5 meters high. As far as the eye could see, the richly ornamented beams and painted rafters were luxurious and elegant. The unique retro and luxurious style of European medieval royalty was fully reflected. There were bright floor-to-ceiling windows and an arched door decorated with holy flowers. Past the arched door was the bedroom. There was a princess bed that was 2 meters wide and 3 meters long. The pink curtains were gently swaying, half closed. Above her head, there was a complicated and beautiful crystal chandelier, elegant and beautiful paintings, an exquisite dressing table, and a high-quality solid wood wardrobe, all of which were luxurious. Everything in front of him was something that could only be seen in movies. But now, it was happening right before his eyes. She still remembered a fairy tale movie she had watched when she was young. The female lead was a royal princess who lived carefree in a dreamy castle manor. Every day, she would wake up in a luxurious princess room like the one in front of her. This was the princess room of her dreams. This was the real princess room. Chapter 1768. Yun Shishir was pleasantly surprised as she walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. Through the clear window, she could see the vast blue ocean, the spotlessly white beach, and the seagulls circling around in the air. The tender green lawn had already been decorated. From this position, she could see the back garden of the castle. The fresh flowers were in full bloom, and it was a beautiful sight to behold. This wasn't the first time she had come to this castle, but the scenery that she saw the previous time was completely different from this time. It looked like a certain man had put in a lot of effort to redecorate the castle according to her dreams. It was too beautiful. It was really too beautiful. If she could, she really wanted to live here for the rest of her life. How blissful would that be? She loved the boundless blue ocean and spotlessly white beach the most. This was the fairy tale wonderland of her dreams. Yun Shishir clutched her chest as her heart was beating like thunder. Everything in front of her gave her a huge surprise. A pair of arms suddenly hugged her from behind. Following that, she was pulled into an embrace from behind by a strong arm. The man's unique magnetic voice was close to her ear as it sounded, "Do you like it?" Xianxia raised her head abruptly and met with Mu Yaja's deep and charming eyes. She smiled, but it looked like she was crying yet not laughing. "I like it. I like it so much." Xianxia turned her head back to look out of the window, but she still couldn't regain her senses. "Did you prepare these for me?" She found it hard to believe and felt as if she was in a dream. Mu Yaja, however, rubbed her nose affectionately. "Who else could it be?" "You." Xianxia was touched by his meticulousness once again. This man, how could he be so meticulous? Also, was he a roundworm in her stomach? Why was it that he always seemed to be able to guess what she was thinking? How did he do it? "It's good that you like it." Mu Yaja saw the corners of her lips curled upwards and he couldn't help but reveal a gratified smile. Earlier on, he was even a little nervous. He, who had always been the one to decide life and death in the midst of bloody storms, was actually a little nervous at this moment. He was secretly angry at himself, but at the same time, he was careful, afraid that she would not like it at all. Now, seeing the yearning in her eyes that she didn't hide at all, his heart finally calmed down. Xianxia was about to say something when someone knocked on the door. Mu Yaja said, "Come in." The door was opened from the outside and several elegantly dressed designers walked in with a set of gowns. "Chairman Mu, the gown is here. Would you like Miss Yun to try it on?" that person asked. Mu Yaja looked at her. "Give it a try?" "Miss Yun, please try it on. If there's anything you're not satisfied with, we'll immediately send someone to rectify it overnight." Xianxia nodded and cooperated. "Okay." Several designers sent Xianxia into the cloakroom, drew the curtains, and tried on the clothes for her. Mu Yaja was waiting on the sofa outside. After changing into the gown, it took a long time for styling. A beautiful gown naturally had to be matched with beautiful makeup to look even more outstanding. However, he also waited patiently. Although the time spent waiting was long, it was also comfortable. He even had a bit of anticipation in his heart. Chapter 1769. At this moment, it was already dusk. Beautiful rays of sunlight shone through the floor-to-ceiling windows and fell on her body. Her long gown seemed to be plated with a faint layer of gold, emitting a holy light, exquisite and beautiful. This gown was a combination of Chinese and Western fashion elements. The skirt was a floor-to-ceiling long dress with a long hemline. The collar and sleeves were the most beautiful elements of Han Chinese clothing, especially the Su embroidery. It was classical and elegant, adding a thick stroke of color to this gown. The gown used a gradual change of color. From the collar to the hemline, it went from light to dark. At first glance, it was like a fairy condensed from roses, magnificent and noble. The neckline was designed with an off-shoulder design and exquisite suzhou embroidery. Every stitch was flawless, especially the embroidery on the neckline. Even if one were to zoom in and look at it carefully, one would still be amazed by how exquisite it was. This was simply a masterpiece. It was designed by a famous designer and handmade. It was definitely not empty talk. Not to mention Xianxia's devilish figure, which was perfectly reflected in this gown. The unique design on the chest, at first glance, was like a design made of peonies. It set off the two sections of her exquisite collarbones that were like jade. Those round and fair shoulders also showed off her ample bosom, but it was not overly revealing. It looked elegant and charming, noble and proper. At first glance, it looked like a proud peony. Her thick hair was meticulously coiled up. Even if there were no decorations, it was draped over her shoulders. There was no need for too much adornment, but it still gave off an unruly beauty. Her previous image was like the pure and beautiful style in The Green Apple and the antique beauty in Lethal Beauty. She had never been as domineering as she was today. It turned out that her beauty could also be so flamboyant. Mu Yaja's gaze suddenly fell on her face. Her small face had been carefully sculpted by the stylist and was delicately painted with makeup. Xianxia was originally a natural beauty. Even without any makeup, she had a face that people could not bear to look away from. At this moment, after the makeup, her beauty had a unique dark color. The gown was designed in Han Chinese. The makeup was also designed to match the design of the gown, using the crystal peach blossom makeup. The stylist did not go with the trend. Instead, he used a combination of Chinese and Korean makeup. Her curved willow-like eyebrows were slightly smooth, and light brown eyebrow powder that outlined her eyebrows, thick and curly long. Even if she said that she envied Mu Yaja's eyelashes, her eyelashes, thick and curly and long. Even if she said that she envied Mu Yaja eyelashes, her eyelashes, thick and long eyelashes. Was thick and curly long, her eyelashes were thick and long. Chapter 1770. What did it mean to capture a person's soul? It probably meant that with just one look, one's heart would be tightly grasped and not let go. It was as though one was possessed by a demon. Like a demon, like a charm, her eyes were like silk. Her fair and translucent makeup looked like it could be broken with a flick of a finger. Her skin was naturally good, and her soft red lips were embellished with a little lipstick. The bright red lipstick didn't appear gaudy, but instead gave a direct visual impact. Her black hair, black eyes, and red lips were moist and moist. When the corners of her lips curved slightly, it was like a blooming flower. He couldn't wait to kiss it and smell that sweet fragrance. Mu Yaja's throat tightened slightly. He held his breath deeply and held it. His gaze fell on her body, but he couldn't bear to look away. It was as though he had tasted a mouthful of wine that had been sealed for 100 years. Just one mouthful and his heart felt slightly tipsy. Even his body felt a little hot. But he knew in his heart that this reaction wasn't because he had drunk the wine. The man suddenly stood up and walked in front of her. When Yun Shirshir saw him approaching, his gaze landed on her body without blinking. For a moment, she couldn't help but feel nervous. She was even more nervous than the last time she acted in front of the camera. When she was done with her makeup, she also took a look at herself in the mirror. But when she saw herself in the mirror, other than being stunned, she also felt a little uncomfortable. She had never thought that she would have such a beautiful moment. In the past, she had neglected to dress herself up. Even if she put on makeup, it would be light makeup and a little powder. However, today's makeup was done meticulously. After a full hour, she looked at herself in the mirror and saw how she had changed from a pure and elegant face to such a beautiful and alluring face. Women weren't born works of art. The sculpting in the later stages was especially important. When she saw the man approaching her, her throat felt a little dry. She asked nervously, "How is it? Is it okay?" Mu Yaja walked in front of her and lowered his head to look at her face. Her hair was all tied up. At this point, her palm-sized little face was completely revealed. However, a few strands of hair naughtily fell by her ear. He suddenly reached out and tucked those strands of hair behind her ear. Because of his careless touch, she shyly lowered her head. Her elf-like ears were actually slightly hot and red. It was obvious that she was shy. This little idiot was always so easily embarrassed. Furthermore, due to the nature of her skin, even the slightest bit of shyness would quickly show itself. Noticing that she was lowering her head, he reached out his finger and lifted her chin with some dissatisfaction. "Raise your head and let me see." Yun Shirshir raised her face shyly, but the corners of her eyes drooped slightly. Her eyelashes, which were like black phoenix feathers, flickered and trembled from time to time. It was obvious that she was too nervous. Oh God, how could she be so nervous? What a disappointment. Yun Shirshir was secretly embarrassed and annoyed. She couldn't help but clench her fists a little tighter. However, she heard his mellow voice say warmly above her head, "Very beautiful." The sudden voice made the air in her brain thin for a few seconds. Her face heated up even more. Really? She looked at him and saw that the amazement in his eyes was undisguised. His heart was moved. It was more than just his heart being moved. Chapter 1771. His body was slightly warm. He really liked how she was dressed up. He opened his mouth again and said with a smile, "You look very beautiful like this." He used an exclamation. Even if it was just a short sentence, it was undoubtedly the highest praise he could give her. When the designers standing behind him heard this, they were also deeply encouraged. To them, When their designs were worn by a beautiful woman, it was the greatest affirmation. To be able to receive Mu Yaja's approval made them even more elated. To the designers, to be able to receive the approval of this distinguished guest in front of them was the highest praise. However, at this time, they were still sensible and knew how to observe the situation. The two of them looked at each other, understood tacitly, and quietly left. The door was tightly shut. In the huge bedroom, only the two of them were left. Mu Yaja reached out and hugged her waist. The tailoring of the exquisite design behind her back was extraordinarily good. This gown was especially comfortable on her body. It wasn't tight or loose. Every inch of curve seemed to be completely natural. He hugged her and pulled her into his embrace. From the angle where he lowered his head, he could see her pair of eyelashes fluttering like butterfly wings. They were thick and long, gentle and lovely, and set off her moving temperament. He couldn't help but nod his head and lightly kiss her fluttering eyelashes. Soft kisses fell between her eyebrows, the corners of her eyes, the tip of her nose, the edge of her lips, and finally to her elegant and beautiful neck. The kiss was deep, but his eyes were burning hot. This was his fiancée, the woman who would hold his hand for the rest of his life, his only wife. She was so beautiful that it was as if she didn't eat the food of mortals. She was like a fairy that no one could profane. Xianxia couldn't help but laugh a little. She pushed him, but he didn't know that he was satisfied and couldn't bear to leave her. His hand cupped the back of her head and he kissed her lips. He didn't forcefully seize it, nor did he attack the city. Instead, he carefully and gently decorated it over and over again. He wanted to taste it. It was like kissing a piece of art, a rare treasure. He loved it, but he couldn't bear to use too much strength. Xianxia pushed him away and looked up. However, when she saw the lipstick on his thin lips, she laughed again. "Your lips are stained with lipstick." Mu Yaja's handsome brows furrowed and he couldn't help but purse his lips. This time, it was even more obvious. Thus, he subconsciously reached out to wipe it off, but she stopped him. "Don't move. I'll clean it for you." She carefully reached out her fingers and used her fingertips to gently wipe the lipstick off his thin lips, little by little. Mu Yaja remained motionless as he allowed her to wipe him. He thought to himself that this was probably the happiest moment of his life. She had once fantasized that if it was their wedding, he would be like the other grooms, to be nervous, uneasy, excited. However, right now, there was probably no nervousness or uneasiness. It was just that his excitement were reflected in reality. Strictly speaking, this was not his first engagement. In the past, under Mu Sheng's repeated requests, he had to comply with the imperial decree and hold a forced engagement with Mu Wanru. Chapter 1772. At that time, in his heart, the engagement ceremony was not that sacred, and there were not many expectations. It was just a dispensable ceremony. As long as the person was there, it was fine. The engagement ceremony was held in the hotel, and everything was carried out according to the normal procedures. Just before the engagement ceremony, he rushed over from the company's morning meeting. Looking at Mu Wanru's face, he was not touched. Instead, he felt a deep sense of disgust from the bottom of his heart. At that time, the engagement ceremony did not leave a deep impression on him. Among the blessings that were either feigned civility or had ulterior motives, he went through the entire process as if he was putting on a show. He had never thought that there would be a day when he would put so much effort into an engagement ceremony. Xianxia did not know how much effort he had put into this engagement ceremony. Everything was done by himself. Even this huge bedroom was redecorated according to his ideas by the designers. But now, when he saw his fiancée standing in front of him with a sweet smile, his heart was greatly touched. Mu Yaja curled his lips slightly, but he could not help but smile. He caressed her cheek as if he had not had enough. Xianxia slapped his hand away coquettishly. "Don't touch. You're going to ruin my makeup." But he said, "You'll look good even if you ruin it." Xianxia was stunned. She did not expect that he would take the initiative to say such sweet words of love. She laughed and teased him. "I didn't expect that sometimes your mouth can be so sweet." Mu Yaja glanced at her and caught the secret smile in her eyes. He reached out and easily caught her hand. Nodding his head again, he covered her mouth with his and whispered, "I never lie. You're good-looking and you're good-looking." "Are you trying to bewitch me?" Xianxia said coquettishly. "Stop it. Don't try to confuse me with sweet words." "Really?" Wuxia emphasized again and again. "My wife, the world's most beautiful woman. The world's most beautiful woman." These 5 words were about to send her to the clouds of happiness. Xianxia pursed her lips and couldn't stop laughing. As she laughed, she gently poked his chest with her finger. "My husband is also the world's most obedient." Sometimes, the words he said made people's hearts feel as sweet as honey. In her heart, his image had always been unsmiling. He was always cold and resolute, but she didn't expect him to have such a gentle side. "Obedient?" Wuxia repeated this word in his heart and furrowed his brows. Wuxia laughed deeply. This was the first time someone had used the word, obedient, to describe him. Listening to his laughter, Xianxia could not help but indulge in it, and her heart collapsed. His voice was extremely low, and when he laughed, it was extremely magnetic. It possessed an extraordinary bewitching power, and people couldn't help but be captivated. She didn't have any ability to resist his laughter. Wuxia raised his eyebrows and pinched her nose. "Obedient? Are you sure you want to use this word to describe me?" "Can't I? Either way, it's all up to you." Xianxia suddenly couldn't help but hug him. Her hands folded behind his waist, and her face gently rested on his chest. There was a kind of dreamlike happiness. Chapter 1773. Wuxia gently caressed her silky hair, only to hear her say worriedly, "If you continue to spoil me like this, won't you spoil me?" Would he spoil her until she became even more arrogant, willful, and unruly? However, Wuxia said matter-of-factly, "I should spoil you until you're unruly, like a little princess, willful and arrogant. I'll spoil you more than anyone else." She couldn't help but feel a little surprised. "Why?" He looked down at her and smiled gently. "Because this way, you won't be able to leave me." He would spoil her a little more. She would rely on him a little more. He liked her dependence. Even if they were together, he would never tire of it. If Lu Jinyu were present at this moment and saw this scene, he would definitely sigh like an old man. This is the sour smell of love. What a torment for single people. At the same time, he would also silently complain that Boss was such a cold-hearted man. Who would have thought that he couldn't escape the fate of being a slave to his wife even when he was deeply in love? Xianxia didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Slave to his wife. His wife came first. She was also happy. Wuxia glanced out of the corner of his eye and saw a pair of red high heels quietly placed on the low table. He suddenly picked her up and carried her to the sofa. Then, he knelt on one knee in front of her and picked up one of her high heels with one hand. His other hand, under her skirt, easily grabbed one of her fair and tender feet. His touch made her involuntarily shrink back shyly. However, he didn't allow her to retreat and held her foot firmly in his hand. Her feet were really not big. They were only about size 35 to 36. She was not short, but her small feet were not even as big as his palm. She was so small and her hands were so small. Even this pair of jade feet could be held in one hand. "You," she suddenly spoke up, trying to stop him. He raised his eyes to look at her. His handsome eyes were deep and his gaze was burning. She immediately blushed and nervously grabbed the corner of her skirt, crumpling it. Looking at this posture, was he going to personally try on the high heels she would wear at the engagement party? However, seeing him kneeling on one knee and lowering himself, she couldn't help but feel a little uncomfortable. He had always been high and mighty, like an emperor. Now that he was kneeling on one knee in front of her, she felt a little shy. At the thought of this, she immediately blushed and said, "I can do it myself." "No need, you sit down." As he said this, he held her foot and gently put the beautiful red high heels on her foot. It was neither too big nor too small, just right. The red high-heeled shoes did not have any repetitive design. The shiny slanted shoes set off a luxurious and elegant feeling. He then put it on the other high heels for her. this as if his. In contrast to hers, his was as if serving her shoes was a matter of course, and there was nothing to be surprised about. After putting it on, he helped her stand up. The skirt fell to the ground, covering a pair of jade feet. She walked back and forth, and the high heels fit her perfectly. Chapter 1774. Just as he was about to walk toward her, there was a knock on the door. Xianxia looked over curiously, thinking that it was the designer outside. In the end, the door was opened from the outside before she could let him in. Xiangyu's chattering voice reached their ears. Xianxia? Are you there? I heard from them that you're in this room. Hearing this, Xianxia's brows furrowed tightly. She knew who had come. Xiangyu, Qingmiao, and Xianxia arrived at the castle in a car right after they got off the plane. After the butlers settled the three of them down, Qingmiao and Qinli went into a frenzy. They were still guessing where Xianxia and Mu Yaja's wedding would be held. They thought that Xianxia's wedding would be held in a romantic place like Bali, Sanya, or the Sea of Love. After they got off the plane, they thought that the hotel was arranged for them. However, when they heard that the destination was a private island, they did not get it until they got off the plane and were sent to the castle. The sisters were utterly shocked. A castle? A castle built on a private island. They stood at the castle's entrance and looked up at the majestic, palace-like retro castle. From afar, it was noble and gorgeous, filled with the classical style of medieval European royalty. At first, they were still in disbelief and convulsion. It was only when the butler welcomed them in that they dared to believe what was happening before their eyes. Oh God, how rich is Xianxia's fiancé? To be able to own his own castle on a private island, he must be worth at least hundreds of millions of yuan. They heard that there were exclusive helicopters and luxury yachts on the island. How could they not be shocked when these luxuries, which they had only seen on the news, appeared before their eyes in real life? Does all of this belong to Mu Yaja? In that case, all of this will belong to Xianxia in the future, too. Oh God. Oh God. For a moment, too many exclamations came to their minds. Qingmiao and Qinli toured the castle excitedly as if they were looking at a work of art. They could not hide the surprise on their faces. There was no need to mention how envious the sisters were of Xianxia. Which girl didn't dream of having a castle of their own? However, all of this could only be imagined. Who would have thought that Xianxia would have everything so real? Qingmiao, in particular, was so jealous that her eyes were red. She wanted it too. She wanted a private jet, a private castle, a yacht, and a beach. She wanted everything she could see. Vanity was like a germ, quickly spreading and occupying one's heart. When they opened the door and saw Xianxia in a luxurious and elegant gown, the three of them were stunned. Then, they surrounded her with envy. When they passed through the arched door, Xiangyu saw Mu Yaja. She was startled for a moment, then her lips curled into a warm smile. Little Mu, you're here too. Because of the angle just now, he didn't see him immediately. Upon seeing Mu Yaja, Qingmiao and Qinli exchanged glances and smiled sweetly. Brother Mu. Brother-in-law to be. Mu Yaja only gave a low hum of acknowledgement, but the smile on his face quickly faded and became a little colder. Chapter 1775. Yes. We just arrived. We heard that you're here, so we rushed over to see you. Xiangyu's smile was incomparably affectionate, and there was a fawning look in her eyes as if she was trying to get close to her. Xianxia, however, asked awkwardly, "Why didn't you knock before coming in?" This question stumped Xiangyu. Qingmiao grinned and said, "The door isn't locked, so we pushed it open and came in. Did we disturb you?" The door was not locked, so they pushed it open and came in. Wasn't this reason a little too pompous? This room was her personal space, after all. How could they enter without knocking or asking for permission? Knocking on the door was out of courtesy, and they could only enter after asking if it was convenient. Xianxia smiled and asked, "Since you just arrived, did the butler arrange a room for you?" "It's just that the room is a little small," answered Xiangyu. "Small?" Xianxia glanced at Mu Yaja with a puzzled look. Qinli, who was beside her, said, "Oh, it's not small. It's just that it's a little cramped for 3 people. Mu Yaja said, the butler may have been negligent. I'll arrange another room for you right away. Xiang Yu, however, said politely, hey, it's fine. Don't be so busy. Let Auntie take a look at you. As she spoke, she walked toward Yun Shirshir, held her shoulders, and sized her up. This dress is so pretty. The material is so good. You must have spent a lot on it, right? Yun Qingmiao and Yun Qinli came over as well, looking at her dress with envy and yearning in their eyes. Sister Shirshir, is this the dress you wore for your engagement? It's so beautiful. The red dress is so festive. More importantly, this dress looks especially elegant on Shirshir. Shirshir, you're so beautiful, just like a princess. Yun Qingmiao continued to bewitch her, too, so much so that Yun Shirshir could not get used to their competing praises for a while. What's going on? Why was he suddenly so enthusiastic towards her? Yun Shirshir was confused for a moment and looked at them in a daze. Seeing her in a daze, Xiang Yu covered her mouth and laughed. Look, Shirshir is shy. Yun Qingmiao immediately retorted, Shirshir, you're a bride-to-be, how can you be shy? But look, Qinli, Shirshir and Brother Mu look so good together. Yun Qinli smiled and said, what Brother Mu? Sister, you should change the way you address him. You should call him future brother-in-law. Yun Shirshir was a little overwhelmed. What was going on? 2 days ago, they were still saying a few words of jealousy to her from time to time. Why did their attitude change completely today? Yun Qingmiao, who was secretly sizing up Mu Yaja, could not help blushing. The man in front of her was dressed in a tailored suit. His black hair was styled with mousse, which made him look even more dashing and handsome. His deep-set eyes were as mesmerizing as the stars, dark and endless. However, when he swept a glance over, his arrogant and cold gaze made her heart skip a beat. No woman would be able to resist his charm if they stood before him. Chapter 1776. He could not help but frown. With just a glance, he knew what she was shy about. Yun Shirshir also noticed her sister's gaze on Mu Yaja. Her brows knitted together in slight displeasure. Xiang Yu was still enthusiastically talking about something, but at the same time, her tone was secretly trying to find out more information. Shirshir? I still don't know what Xiao Mu's job is. As she spoke, she suddenly pulled her to the side by the arm and asked enviously, is Xiao Mu's family especially rich? I was shocked when I saw that he had a private jet and a castle yacht. At first, I thought that he was just an ordinary white-collar worker, but now, it seems that he's not that simple. Yun Qingmiao pretended to ask casually, Shirshir, what's the background of our future brother-in-law? You haven't told us about him. Is it because you don't treat us as your family? Xiang Yu quickly chimed in, that's right. Tell us, and we'll give you a reference to check him out. Yun Shirshir frowned and glanced at Mu Yaja, only to see him standing there and patiently talking to Yun Qinli. Yun Qinli was like a happy little bird as she circled around Mu Yaja, looking at him with adoration and asking questions from time to time. Yun Shirshir retracted her gaze and replied slowly, him? He's an employee of the Mu Group. This was what Mu Yaja had said to her classmates during their class reunions. A CO was also a type of employee, so she was just being more reserved in her words. Mu Group? Employee? Xiang Yu was surprised to hear that. She had never heard of the Mu Group. She had never come into contact with the business world, so she did not know what kind of status the Mu Group had in the business world. An employee, though, it did not look like one, right? How could an ordinary employee afford a private jet and such a huge island of the dead? Shirshir, are you hiding it from me, or are you also kept in the dark? He doesn't look like a company employee at all. I think he must be a rich second-generation heir with a net worth of billions. Otherwise, how could an engagement ceremony be so extravagant? As soon as Xiang Yu finished speaking, Mu Yaja seemed to have heard her voice and walked towards them. He walked forward and put his arm around Yun Shirshir's shoulders in a very natural manner. He smiled politely and said, this is not a big deal. Shirshir and I only have one engagement ceremony in our lives. Naturally, we have to make it grand. When Xiang Yu saw Mu Yaja walking over, she was startled. She was afraid that he had heard her words. However, when she saw that he was polite and didn't seem to be angry, she felt relieved. Xiao Mu, you haven't introduced yourself yet. Since you are Xirshi's fiancée, as Xirshi's aunt, and Xirshe is my only niece, I have to check on her. Our Xirshe is gentle and virtuous. Since you've decided to marry her, then you should take a look. Since she's already your fiancée, then it's my responsibility as an aunt to inquire about your family situation. These words were said in an extremely dignified manner. Xiangyu just wanted to see what kind of family Mu Yaja was from. She was just being vain. Chapter 1777. Check. Mu Yaja raised his eyebrows and quickly understood her intentions. Yun Xirshe was a little angry when she heard Xiangyu's words. What did she mean by being her aunt and checking for her? What right did she have to check for her? What did it have to do with her, who she was marrying, the status of the person she was marrying, and his family background? Could it be that when she got married, she had to know everything about the person she was going to marry? Regardless of whether he was rich or poor, she had her eyes on this man and wanted to spend the rest of her life with him. If she said that, it would make others misunderstand that she chose to be with Mu Yaja because of his family background. Yun Xirshe was so angry that her face flushed red. Her face, which was originally covered in rouge, was now even redder. Mu Yaja lowered his head to look at her and knew that she was a little unhappy. Hence, he said, Xirshe is my fiancée and the wife that I have decided to be with for the rest of my life. There is no doubt about my feelings for her. Of course, the so-called sincerity is not something that can be proven with empty words. I will only say that regardless of whether I am rich or poor, even if I have to give up everything, I will not let her suffer. Moreover, the so-called power, wealth, and status are never eternal. But my sincerity towards her will never change in this lifetime. His voice was deep and mellow, with a charming magnetism. His words were not to be refuted. Xiangyu was stunned. His sincere confession was so deep and sincere that it indirectly refuted her words. Instead, it made her words seem even more pretentious. Who was Mu Yaja? He had been on the battlefield for a long time and had traveled through bloody battles. He had seen many schemes and schemes. No matter who it was, what they were thinking, he could see through it all with just one look. How could Xiangyu's narrow-mindedness escape his eyes? With just a few words, she had no choice but to shut up. His invisible and imposing aura made her feel a little light-headed and light-footed. This man's aura was not ordinary. His words were overbearing, making people have no choice but to submit to him. Xiangyu smiled awkwardly and nodded. That's right. What power? What wealth? It's all fake. Only sincerity was real. The most important thing is that you care about Xirshe and the two of you are happy together. It's good that you understand. Mu Yaja paused for a moment, then said in a deep voice, Now, I'm going to bring Xirshe to meet a few of my important guests. Please return to your room. If you need anything, just instruct the housekeeper. Don't go out and walk around as much as possible. Be careful not to get lost. With that, he hugged Xirshe and left the room without looking back. Xiangyu was momentarily stunned by his domineering declaration. She stood rooted to the ground, unable to recover her senses for a long time. Yun Qingmiao, who was behind her, was more observant. She could vaguely detect a hint of mockery in Mu Yaja's words. Her face turned pale as she tugged at her mother's clothes. Mom, what you said just now was too straightforward. People will think that we haven't seen the world. This brat clearly doesn't put me, his aunt, in his eyes. After Xiangyu came back to her senses, she was clearly very angry. Chapter 1778. She should be thankful that she was Yun Xirshe's aunt. Even if she were to spend her entire life like this, it would be impossible for her to stand before Mu Yaja and let him take a look at her. Having said that, Xiangyu couldn't say anything else. The three of them could only return to their room resentfully. However, just as Mu Yaja had expected, they really got lost in the huge castle. Helpless, they could only ask the butler to bring them back to their room awkwardly. Along the way, Yun Xirshe was still puzzled. She didn't know who this man was bringing her to see. It wasn't until they arrived at the reception room that she saw Lu Jinyu sitting on the sofa and smoking a cigarette that she suddenly realized what was going on. The moment Lu Jinyu saw Mu Yaja push open the door and enter, he saw the woman in his arms. He immediately stood up and greeted with a smile, "Chief, sister-in-law." Yun Shishir smiled at him politely. She had a better impression of him after he helped her at the hospital last time. However, facing the lingering smoke in the reception room, she still frowned uncomfortably and waved her hand slightly. She actually didn't like the smell of cigarettes. It was very suffocating. However, Lu Jinyu knew how to read people's expressions. Seeing that she seemed to be a little disgusted by the smell of cigarettes, he immediately put out the cigarette in his hand in the ashtray. Yun Shishir was touched by his action. He knew how to take a woman's feelings into consideration. This man should be an elegant gentleman with good etiquette. There were 3 other unfamiliar men sitting in the reception room. They also stood up behind Lu Jinyu and greeted Muyaja, "Boss?" One of the handsome men, who looked slightly younger, looked at Yun Shishir with a hint of surprise in his eyes. However, more than that, he couldn't hide his amazement. "This must be sister-in-law." Yun Shishir smiled politely. "Hello." Muyaja said, "Let me introduce you. This is your sister-in-law, my fiancée. From now on, all of you should follow Jinyu and call her sister-in-law." When everyone heard this, they first glanced at Yun Shishir and smiled at each other. Then they said in unison, "Hello, sister-in-law." Yun Shishir did not know whether to laugh or cry at such a situation. "They are? You didn't even introduce them to me." Yun Shishir secretly rebuked. Mu Yaja introduced Lu Jinyu. "You should have met this man before. Lu Jinyu is in charge of all the affairs of the corporation under me. He's very capable." Lu Jinyu smiled and said, "Sister-in-law, we met a few days ago. You should still remember me." Yun Shishir pretended to be confused and said, "I don't remember." Lu Jinyu turned pale with fright. "No way. Sister-in-law, it's only been 2 days and you've already forgotten about me?" After saying that, he couldn't hide the disappointment and sadness on his face. Yun Shishir giggled, but she was a little shy. "I'm just kidding. It's all thanks to your help at the hospital that day. How could I forget?" Lu Jinyu was stunned, but he laughed out loud. His sister-in-law was really cute sometimes. "This is Xianxia. Don't be fooled by his baby face. He's actually 27 years old." Mu Yaja introduced the man who looked exceptionally young and tender. Xianxia immediately protested, "Boss? You can't do this. I'm only 18 years old." Chapter 1779. Judging from his appearance, she had thought that he was underage. It turned out that he was only 1 year younger than Mu Yaja. Mu Yaja then proceeded to introduce the rest of the team members. They were all his right-hand men, who were in charge of all the affairs of the Xinyu Financial Group. For example, Jiang Shun looked young, but he was the financial director of the Xinyu Financial Group and firmly controlled the financial power. Another was Pei Xiaoyu, the public relations director of the Xinyu Financial Group. He was about 25 or 26 years old and looked gentle and refined. The last was a slightly older man, Jing Cheng. The 4 of them were also attending the engagement party as Mu Yaja's brothers. After Mu Yaja's introduction, the 4 men immediately gave Yun Shishir a friendly and respectful smile. The 4 of them addressed her as sister-in-law, but Yun Shishir was a little at a loss. She blushed slightly. This was the first time she was facing Mu Yaja's brothers, so she couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. However, after interacting with each other, they were all experts in EQ. After laughing and chatting, they easily dispelled the awkward atmosphere. They all had a close and friendly attitude towards Yun Shishir. After all, she was Mu Yaja's fiancée, so they naturally liked her. Jiang Shun even circled Yun Shishir twice and sighed in amazement. "You're indeed the woman that boss likes. Sister-in-law, you're really elegant. This is the gown that you'll wear at the engagement party, right? Oh, sister-in-law, you're so beautiful in it. You're just like a fairy." Lu Jinyu joked, "Jiang Shun, don't mess around. Boss is still standing here. Don't be fooled by boss's usual behavior. He's actually a big vinegar jar." If you get too close to him, he'll be jealous. Jiang Shun was slightly surprised. Then he immediately kept a distance from Yun Shirshir. Boss, don't misunderstand. I don't have any feelings for sister-in-law. Lu Jinyu said, Jiang Shun, you didn't see that last time. I just helped sister-in-law up. His gaze almost killed me on the spot. If looks could kill, I would have died a long time ago. When everyone heard this, they burst into laughter again. The atmosphere in the reception room quickly livened up. It seems that after getting married, boss must be a slave to his wife. He'll listen to his wife. I'm afraid that we won't have any status in the future. Lu Jinyu sighed and shook his head as he said this. Mu Yaja shot him a look, and he immediately shut his mouth, not daring to say another word. Jiang Shen, who was standing at the side, said coolly, Jinyu, be careful with your words and actions. You'd better be careful with your words. Boss is very vengeful. If you offend him, you might lose your year-end bonus this year. Lu Jinyu immediately said pitifully, No. Boss, you'd better not to be a problem boss. I'm still hoping to earn some money and find a wife in the future. You have a wife, but the rest of us are still single. You mustn't make things difficult for us. Everyone burst into laughter again. Yun Shirshir realized that when he was with them, Mu Yaja's face was not as cold as usual. Instead, he had a warm smile on his face. He did not feel much disgust when he saw his brothers making fun of him. In the Mu group, he had always been a man of his word. He gave people a feeling that he was very unapproachable. Chapter 1780. As his left and right arms, the four of them were all young and capable. Mu Yaja had taken a fancy to their character and talent, so he recruited them. From the establishment of the Xingyu Financial Group until now, the five of them had gone through storms together. It could be said that they had many years of revolutionary feelings and had long cultivated a tacit understanding that was as close as brothers. With just a glance, they could understand each other tacitly. Lu Jinyu suddenly asked, Boss, didn't the two young masters come? Mu Yaja looked at her. Yun Shirshir immediately explained, they got off the plane and are a little tired, so they're resting in their room for a while. You'll see them tomorrow. The children are still young. After such a long journey, they must be tired. They should rest, Jiang Shen said. As he spoke, he suddenly presented a treasure. Sister-in-law, I've specially prepared a mysterious gift for you at this engagement banquet. Yun Shirshir was a little curious. What gift? You'll be able to see it tomorrow. Wait and see. You'll definitely like it. Jiang Shen was smug and obviously very confident. Lu Jinyu mercilessly undermined him. If sister-in-law doesn't like it, you'll be embarrassed. It's better than you. You came empty-handed. How can you have the nerve to criticize me? What do you mean I came empty-handed? I've prepared a big red packet for sister-in-law this time. Jiang Shen ruthlessly disdained. How tacky. Lu Jinyu instantly felt hurt and looked at Yun Shirshir pitifully. Yun Shirshir saved the situation. I don't think it's tacky. It's a big red packet. How big is it? See. Sister-in-law likes it. As he spoke, Lu Jinyu smiled mysteriously and winked at Yun Shirshir. It's a very big red packet. You'll know when you count it. Yun Shirshir smiled and did not take his words to heart. Still, it was true that she was shocked by Lu Jinyu's handiwork afterward. She thought that the so-called big red packet would be at most 6 figures, which was already impressive. And the result? Lu Jinyu, on the other hand, had prepared a total of 7 figures in red packets. Most of them were treasured currencies from various countries. There were several large gift boxes. Yun Shirshir counted them so many that her hands were about to cramp. Yun Shirshir didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Was this guy going to give her all his savings in a red packet? Of course, this was all in the future. After returning to her room from the reception room, Yun Shirshir had dinner and decided to rest early. Tomorrow was the engagement party. She was nervous and slightly excited. She suddenly thought of something. She turned on the desk lamp and dialed Gong Jie's number. However, the number she dialed was not within the service area. Her heart suddenly felt a little gloomy. An indescribable desolation appeared on his face. Did he turn off his phone? Or was he purposely avoiding her? Was he still unwilling to attend her engagement party? When he thought of this, what followed was a huge disappointment. Perhaps she shouldn't have forced him to be there. It might not be a bad thing if he didn't come. After all, Gong Jie's hatred for the Mu family was already in his bones and blood. It was difficult to get rid of it. He did not strongly oppose her marriage to Mu Yaja, which was already the greatest satisfaction he could give her. Chapter 1781. The next morning, the stylist brought the perfectly ironed gown into the bedroom early in the morning, along with many bags of makeup. After washing up, it was time for more than an hour to put on makeup. The engagement party was divided into two parts. One was the engagement ceremony, and the other was a bonfire banquet. Thus, the stylist prepared 2 sets of gowns for her. The venue's makeup was done. The azure sea and the clear blue sky reflected each other. From afar, they formed a line. Above the clouds, a rainbow was faintly discernible. At a glance, it was as beautiful as a rainbow bridge. Seagulls hovered close to the sea's surface. A gentle breeze blew, and on the white beach was a fresh arch made of roses. These roses were picked when they were at their brightest. They were made into bouquets and flown in overnight. In the early morning, the servants put them on the arch door. The fresh and tender petals were still stained with transparent dewdrops. In front of the arch, there was a carpet of fresh flowers. Red, yellow, and purple were all blooming together. More than 100 seats were set up in the venue. In the center of the venue, 5 long buffet tables were set up. The kitchen had already started cooking desserts. In order to satisfy the needs of different guests, the flavors and ingredients were the freshest and most diverse. A fleet of BMWs was parked at the castle's entrance. Of course, the so-called fleet of BMWs did not refer to BMW cars. Instead, it was a fleet of snow-white horses. Just like in a fairy tale, everything was unbelievably beautiful. The guests who had arrived the day before were already awake. Some ran to the beach to enjoy the morning sea breeze after breakfast. Some were curious and wanted to see the venue's setting, but they were politely asked to leave by the venue's security personnel. Yun Qingmiao, on the other hand, was lucky enough to catch a glimpse of the engagement party's setting. Jealousy filled her heart. How did Yun Xianxia manage to hook up with such a powerful husband? It's just an engagement party. It's not even a formal wedding. Why did they spend so much money on it? They even lied to us by saying that he's a company employee. Who are they kidding? As he thought about it, his heart felt twisted. He felt that this kind of life was too unfair. After Yu and Xiao Yichen woke up, they ran to Yun Xianxia's room. They had fallen asleep on the plane yesterday and were carried off the plane by the bodyguards. As a result, she missed the moment when Yun Xianxia tried on the gown and missed the chance to see how beautiful her mother looked in the gown. Therefore, she hurried over early in the morning to inquire about it out of curiosity. The 2 little guys pushed the door open. In the huge princess room, the morning sun shone through the window. Yun Xianxia stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling window. At this moment, she had already changed into a formal dress. She was like a blooming rose, making people unable to take their eyes off her. Xiao Yichen was stunned. He stared at her with his big, watery eyes without blinking. Yu glanced at him and felt sorry for him. She kindly raised her hand to close his jaw that was about to dislocate. Xiao Yichen was still so shocked that he could not speak. He had never seen his mother look so beautiful. She was wearing a rose-colored gown and looked like a fresh flower. It was the most beautiful moment. Yu waved her hand in front of his eyes. "Hello. Muichen, are you stupid?" Chapter 1782. Yun Xianxia was admiring the scenery of the beach through the window. The pure white beach, the circling seagulls, and the gentle sound of the waves crashing against the beach. Everything was so beautiful. The morning breeze by the beach blew in their faces, but they did not feel cold at all. Yu waved his hand in front of his eyes. "Hey, Muichen, are you dumb?" Xiao Yichen slapped away Yu's hand that was blocking his view. He ran excitedly towards Yun Xianxia and hugged her from behind. "Mommy!" Yun Xianxia was stunned. When she came back to her senses, she turned slightly and placed her hand gently on Xiao Yichen's shoulder. She smiled. "Baby, you're awake." Xiao Yichen nodded his head vigorously and praised, "Mommy is so beautiful. You look like a fairy. In the future, Mommy will wear such a beautiful dress every day, okay?" Yun Shirshir was amused by his innocent words. She raised her eyebrows and squatted down slightly so that she was at his eye level. She did not know whether to laugh or cry. "How can I wear this dress every day?" Yu walked over and said helplessly, "This guy was stunned when he stood at the door just now. But Mommy, you look really good in this dress." Suddenly, he could not help but say viciously, "Maybe Mommy doesn't care about her appearance normally and doesn't pay attention to her appearance. That's why you look as beautiful as a fairy when you dress up." This was why Mu Yichen was taken aback by the disparity in his heart. Yun Shirshir did not know whether to laugh or cry at his words. She pretended to be sad and said, Yu, do you have to be so mean to Mommy?" Xiao Yichen giggled and said, "Yu has such a vicious mouth. Mommy, teach him a lesson." Yu glanced at him coldly and smacked him on the head. "You're the one who's asking for a beating." Feeling aggrieved, little Yichen hugged his injured head and glared at him with a pitiful expression. Yun Shirshir immediately said, Yu, don't bully your brother." "Mommy, he's the one who bullied me." Yu looked aggrieved. When it came to acting innocent, he was an experienced veteran. When Yun Shirshir saw his pitiful expression, she couldn't bear to scold him. Mu Yichen retorted innocently, "When did I bully you? It's clear that you've been bullying me more. You still have the nerve to ask me? Last night, you slept so restlessly. You kicked the blanket and hugged me like a bear. I didn't rest well the whole night. I was almost paralyzed by you." After Yu finished speaking, Mu Yichen immediately looked guilty. "Alright, both of you, stop fooling around, okay?" Mu Yichen nodded and said, "Okay. Today is Mommy's engagement party. Xiao Yichen, you have to be good." Yu ignored him and walked in front of Yun Shirshir. Yun Shirshir was squatting down so that they were at eye level. "Mommy?" Yu gazed longingly at his mother's face, which was as beautiful as a flower. His eyes lingered on every inch of her face until they finally landed on her slightly slanted shoulder strap. He raised a brow, but with a gentle smile, he reached out his little hand and carefully adjusted the strap for her. He lowered his long eyelashes and the tenderness in his eyes made Yun Shirshir's heart melt. "Mommy, you're already 24 years old. Why are you still so careless? The shoulder strap is crooked. It won't be pretty anymore." Chapter 1783. As Yu tidied himself up seriously, his pink lips curved into a delicate smile. Yun Shirshir stared at him in a daze. For a moment, she even held her breath, unwilling to let her heavy breathing disturb the tranquil warmth of this moment. This morning, Yu got out of bed and dressed himself. He tidied up his clothes, from suspenders to a small suit to a black bow tie. He looked like a noble little gentleman, noble, elegant, and courteous. He was especially attentive. He even pinned a particularly beautiful crystal brooch in the pocket of his suit. It was obvious that he attached great importance to this special day. Yu was very particular about his appearance. He usually paid attention to his clothes, but today he dressed himself up to look especially handsome. As she looked at him, it was as if she could imagine that in 10 years, this little guy would definitely be like his father, a handsome and elegant young master. As he lowered his eyes, his long and thick eyelashes cast a deep shadow on his eyelids, making his gaze deep and charming. How time flies. As Yu smiled, he looked up at her with a pair of clear eyes. In the blink of an eye, my mommy is actually married. Yun Shirshir didn't know whether to laugh or cry at his old-fashioned tone. She deliberately teased him. Yu, why are you so old at such a young age? When you speak, you're as mature as a little old man. Those who don't know better would think that you're marrying off a daughter. It's not certain whether I'll have a daughter in the future, but I only have one mommy. I definitely can't bear to marry her off. For as long as he could remember, he and his mommy depended on each other. He originally thought that this kind of life would last for a long time. He even imagined that in the future, he and his mommy would depend on each other for survival until the end. He admitted that he was a mommy's boy. After all, in his life, Yun Shirshir occupied the most important position. From the time he learned how to walk, eat, go to school by himself, and take care of himself, he worked hard for everything because he wanted his mommy to live the happiest life. At that time, he thought that since he didn't have a daddy and his mommy was so lonely, he must accompany her to the end. He was the only man in mommy's life. Therefore, he saw loving her and taking care of her as his most important mission, and it was his duty to do so. He did not feel that this was a burden. Instead, he enjoyed this responsibility and mission. However, on this day, his mission had probably been handed over to Wuxia like a baton being handed over. He felt happy and blissful, but he was also reluctant to part with her. He was happy because mommy finally had her own happiness. In the future, she would no longer be alone and would no longer be lonely. He was reluctant because after handing over this mission, he felt an indescribable sense of emptiness in his heart. His feelings for Xianxia were complicated and uneasy, generous and selfish. Xianxia saw that there were some complicated emotions in his expression. He seemed lonely, happy and worried. For a moment, she couldn't figure out what this child was thinking in his heart at that moment. She smiled softly and gently placed her hand on the back of his hand. Yu suddenly turned his hand over to hold hers. Chapter 1784. Yu smiled and said, "Mommy, you love Daddy. But what I want to tell you now is that even though you'll grow old and I'll grow up, my heart will always be with you. Right now, I'm handing you over to Daddy because I believe that he'll be able to give you happiness and take on the responsibilities of a husband. But if he bullies you, feel free to tell me. If he lets you down, I won't hesitate to take you back from Daddy even if I have to give it my all. Do you understand?" For some reason, Xianxia felt an inexplicable bitterness in her heart when he said those words with such deep emotion. How could her Yu be so sensible? For a 7-year-old child to say such words, it was not something that should be said at his age. Xianxia pulled him into her embrace and smiled. "All right, Yu, Mommy will definitely be happy." Xianxia suddenly stood aside and felt touched for a moment. Perhaps he could not fully understand Yu's current state of mind. If it was in the past, he would definitely think that it was just an engagement. After the wedding, the four of them would become a family and truly be together. This should be something to be happy about, shouldn't it? But now, he did not think so anymore. After spending so much time together, he truly understood the close bond between Yu and Mommy. It was a bond that was thicker than blood. These 7 years were neither long nor short, but they had experienced countless emotions and drifted through wind and rain. It was precisely because of this bond that Yu was worried that Mommy would not be happy. That was why he felt uneasy. Just like those fathers who married off their daughters, the atmosphere at the wedding was clearly so happy, but when they handed their daughter's hands to the young man, they felt reluctant, uneasy, nervous, relieved, worried, touched, all kinds of feelings, all kinds of feelings, all kinds of feelings, all kinds of feelings. As if they were telepathic, Xianxia could even vaguely feel Yu's reluctance. He could empathize with him. Yu said seriously, "Mommy, you must be happy. Otherwise, he would definitely regret his decision." He regretted handing her over to his father. Xianxia gently caressed his palm-sized handsome face and nodded with a smile. However, her eyes were faintly moist. She tried her best to hold back the sourness in her heart. At 11:30 a.m., the guests entered the venue one after another. Everyone entered the venue and sat in their seats, chatting and laughing. Today was a good day. This island was located in a semi-tropical zone and was warm all year round. Bathing in the fresh sea breeze and feeling the embrace of the blue sky and the sea, one could not help but feel carefree. At the main venue of the wedding, many children of the VIPs were smiling and taking photos in front of the arch decorated with flowers. Most children liked beautiful things. Some of the children who loved to cry would forget to make a fuss in this romantic atmosphere. They would sit in their parents' arms and smile innocently. Wuxia's group of brothers also rushed to the venue and started to entertain the guests. Xianxia pushed Yunyeho's wheelchair and sat down under the arrangement. Yunyeho looked around at the romantic venue and could not help but sigh. This venue seems to have been prepared with great care. Chapter 1785. Surrounded by such a romantic atmosphere, she did not even dare to raise her voice. Yun Yecheng nodded with a smile. It's a once-in-a-lifetime engagement, after all. The preparations must be meticulous. This shows that Xirshi's fiancé dotes on Xirshi a lot. He put in the effort to give her such a romantic wedding. Today is a good day. I'm so excited that I can't sit still. Yun Yecheng smiled. You just have to sit still and watch Xirshi receive everyone's blessings. Yun Yeho smiled, feeling happy for Yun Xirshi from the bottom of his heart. Yun Qingmiao, who was sitting at the side, could not hold back her surging emotions. All her attention was on the romantic setting of the wedding. Yun Qinli, on the other hand, was looking left and right. She could not help feeling disappointed when she did not spot Gu Xingzi's figure. It seemed that Yun Xirshi and Gu Xingzi's relationship was not that good, after all. Gu Xingzi did not attend the engagement ceremony, which meant that the two were not on good terms. Xiang Yu, on the other hand, was only focused on observing the guests present. The venue was divided into the groom's and the bride's seats. The bride's seats were filled with Yun Xirshi's relatives and friends. Xiang Yu, on the other hand, was sizing up the groom's guests' attire, and identity tokens. She was obviously looking for a match. From time to time, she would tug at Yun Qingmiao's sleeves and whisper to her about which guest was young and handsome, which guest was wearing an expensive watch, and which guest looked rich. Xiao Shui, who was sitting at the side, heard all of this. She frowned in disgust and wanted to flare up on the spot. She did not expect Xirshi to have such a top-notch relative. What was this? Today was Xirshi's engagement ceremony, yet this top-notch relative was actually looking for a rich and powerful man for her daughter. If not for the special occasion today, she would have lost her temper on the spot. Xiao Shui forced herself to hold it in. She planned to bring it up to Yun Xirshi after the banquet. At 11:40, the BMW appeared at the gate of the castle on time. When Yun Xirshi appeared at the door in her splendid attire, she saw 2 rows of concierges holding gift books in their hands. Their postures were ramrod straight and their chests puffed out. Standing at the end were 2 rows of flower boys holding fresh and tender white roses in their hands. As for the flower boys, she didn't know where Mu Yaja had hired them from. They had delicate features, blonde hair, and blue eyes. Standing in the middle of the cluster of flowers, they looked holy and beautiful. The words of the white rose symbolized respect and holy love. Only you are compatible. At the same time, it also means that you belong to me. Yun Xirshi looked at the beautiful bouquets and smiled. At the entrance of the castle, a red carpet was laid out neatly. At the end of the red carpet was a BMW waiting for her. Mu Yaja stood beside the carriage. When Yun Xirshi's gaze fell on him, she couldn't help but be shocked. It was not that she had never seen him in a suit before. In fact, this man had a preference for suits. Perhaps it was because of his status, but he would only take off his suit and change into casual clothes on rare occasions. In the past, he had always worn a well-ironed suit. However, she had never seen a man who could make a suit look so cold, elegant, and noble. Chapter 1786. However, with that handsome face of his, when he appeared in front of her against the light, she was like a young and immature girl. Her heart was stirred and her heart was beating wildly. So handsome, especially his hairstyle, which had been carefully trimmed. In the past, his fringe naturally covered his handsome eyebrows. It was not messy, but it did not disappoint. Now that he had styled his hair, his handsome face was completely revealed. His deep and mesmerizing eyes were even more captivating, making it impossible for anyone to avoid them. His gaze seemed to have a magical power. When it landed on her body, it made her heart beat like thunder. She was so nervous that she even forgot how to calm her breathing. Mu Yaja also looked at her with a gentle smile on his lips. It seemed that only because it was her, when he smiled, that gentleness could reach the bottom of his eyes. Suddenly, music started playing. Amidst the sacred music, the flower children held bouquets and sang a sacred and romantic poem in unison. Love is a star shrouded in the morning fog. Without you, heaven also becomes hell. Adorable war horse, subtly trembling, this shy and gentle embrace. On your beautiful cherry lips, I'm used to using kisses instead of words. My kiss is like a flame from the bottom of my heart. The happiness that kissed me yesterday has turned into nothingness today. I've obtained sincere love, spending time with you under the parasol tree. A flower child came forward and handed the bouquet of white roses to Wuxia. Wuxia took the bouquet and slowly walked towards her. With every step he took, her heartbeat actually sped up. The person in front of him was standing there, waiting for him to welcome her and hold her hand. Wuxia looked at her. Against the light, his gaze was like a torch, unwavering. Xianxia's hands were crossed in front of her as she nervously watched him approach. Her skirt reached the ground, holy and dignified. Even if the wind slightly ruffled her hair, it did not diminish her beauty at all. Speaking of which, temperament was a very strange thing. Some people were born noble, but they didn't have an elegant temperament. As for her, although she wasn't born into a noble family and wasn't born into a rich family, when she appeared at the entrance of the castle, wearing a luxurious dress, her elegant and noble temperament couldn't be concealed and was on the verge of bursting out. Wuxia walked in front of her with his right hand behind his back and his left hand holding a bouquet of flowers. He only stopped when he was right in front of her and nodded to look at her. The melodious music of the ceremony sounded. Everyone on the scene held their breaths, either in amazement or anticipation as they stared at this moment. His lowered gaze made her even more nervous. For a moment, her mind was blank and she was at a loss of what to do. She didn't even know where to place it properly. The first time in her life, which she had fantasized about countless times, was displayed so realistically and dreamily in front of her. When the man in her heart stood in front of her with a rose in his hand, she suddenly realized that the wedding in her fantasy was not a dream. Xianxia looked at him with a blushing face and a hint of shyness. It was as if her face was dyed with peach blossoms. Even the best quality rouge couldn't compare to her at this moment. She pursed her lips and took the white roses from his hand. Around them, there was a round of applause. Chapter 1787. Xianxia nodded and replied in a voice as soft as a mosquito. In the next second, under everyone's stunned gazes, the man carried her in a princess carry. Hugging her waist, he easily supported all of her weight. Wuxia gently lowered his head and gracefully kissed her lips, pressing them tightly against her red lips. At this moment, his low and hoarse voice undoubtedly revealed that he was equally happy. "You're so beautiful today." Hearing this, Xianxia's heart was filled with sweetness and shyness at the same time. Her face became even hotter. No matter how many praises she received, it would not be able to compare to this sentence from him. The highest praise in love was probably this sentence of love from him at this moment. He rarely said such words of love. This man had always been reserved and deep, but when he said it, it made her heart beat faster. Xianxia held the fresh flowers tightly and looked up, only to meet his deep eyes. There was a slight burning heat in them, and he did not hide his deep love for her, who was beautiful today. Wuxia gently carried her and walked towards the carriage. Even though he was carrying her, his body was as light as a swallow and his steps were light. After getting into the carriage, the concierge walked over and closed the door. The attendant then drove the carriage to the venue of the engagement banquet. Yu and Xianxia watched the carriage leave. They looked at each other and smiled, then got into the same carriage and immediately caught up. Sitting in the carriage, Xianxia was surprised to find that along the way, both sides of the road were covered with roses. As the carriage moved, the petals scattered on the ground. When the wind blew, the petals flew and danced in the air. It was as if they were in a fairy tale. "It's so beautiful." Xianxia was so touched that she couldn't help but mumble. Today, he really gave her a big surprise and touched her. She never thought that this man, who was used to being cold and arrogant, would spend so much effort on the engagement banquet. Even the smallest details were not overlooked. Putting aside the huge amount of money he had spent, just the fact that he was able to bring out all the romantic scenes that she had imagined in front of her was enough to make her feel that it was extremely valuable. She was a person who was easily satisfied. She believed that weddings generally went according to the procedure. The most important thing was to be with the person she loved. Nothing else mattered. But he used his actions to tell her that if he loved her, he would spare no effort to fulfill all her dreams. At the same time, He was grateful for his luck. Being able to meet him and stay together with him had truly exhausted all of her luck. The smile on her face fell into his eyes, and he quickly smiled as well. Laughter was contagious between people who were close to each other. She suddenly looked up and said, "Mu Yaja, am I dreaming?" "Why do you say that?" "Because it's hard to believe that you've done so much for me. I didn't dare to think that my engagement party would be so romantic, so I was afraid that this was a dream. When I woke up, it would be over and there would be nothing left." Everything that entered his eyes was something that he had only seen in his dreams. Yun Shirshir's worry made him even more amused. He reached out and brushed away the petals that had fallen on her head. He then gently scratched the bridge of her nose. This action seemed to be something that he often did to her. It became the most intimate action between the two of them. He whispered in her ear, "Little fool, this isn't a dream. Everything is real, including me." Chapter 1788. But really, she was really nervous about what she had just seen and what he had just said. Apart from being nervous, she was also looking forward to the upcoming engagement banquet. He looked at her and saw her exposed neck and shoulders. They were fair and delicate, like the graceful curve of a swan. Following the curve, he could see her beautiful fullness. Sexy and charming. Seducing his gaze, he became more and more eager to explore. However, he restrained himself and warned himself that now was not the time to do whatever he wanted. Usually at this time, his ambition would be revealed. He desperately hoped that after the engagement banquet, their wedding would proceed as soon as possible. He was already anxious to keep her as his own. How could he let others think about and covet her when she was so beautiful? "What's the venue like? I'm really curious about how you decorated it," she asked with some anticipation, but he still pretended to be mysterious and blinked his eyes. "You'll know when we reach the venue. You just have to wait quietly for the engagement banquet that I've prepared for you." Yun Shirshir's lips suddenly curved slightly. His answer made her look forward to it even more, and her heart felt even sweeter. The carriages moved forward and soon arrived at the venue. However, just as she was about to get off the carriage, as if he could not bear for her toes to touch the ground, he carried her out of the carriage again in front of everyone's eyes. Yun Shirshir hit his shoulder lightly but not hard. In her eyes, there was a hint of shyness. "Put me down. You're making a joke out of yourself. Who dares to laugh at you?" Mu Yaja asked her back. This made her even more embarrassed. However, as he said this, he still put her down. However, just as she steadied herself, the man's strong and warm hand held her hand without hesitation. Yun Shirshir laughed in her heart. Was this man afraid that she would run away? But as she thought of this, her heart was still happy. At least, it meant that he cherished her, didn't it? From the man's details, she could see how important she was in his heart. When they arrived at the entrance of the venue and stepped on the red carpet, fireworks bloomed and fell on them. The innocent and romantic laughter of the flower girls standing on both sides of the red carpet quickly stirred up the atmosphere of the entire venue. Yun Shirshir had a panoramic view of the entire venue. "I like it so much. Especially that arch decorated with flowers. It was simply too romantic." In the past, when she watched movies, she was especially envious of couples standing under this romantic arch and receiving blessings. Yun Shirshir secretly sighed in her heart. She let him hold her hand and walk towards the venue. Mu Yaja suddenly caught sight of Lu Jinyu, who was walking out of the venue. Lu Jinyu looked inexplicably nervous, as if he had something important to tell him. Mu Yaja couldn't help but stop and raise his eyebrows in confusion. Seeing that he had stopped walking, Yun Shirshir also looked at him curiously. However, when she saw that he was looking into the distance, she followed his line of sight and looked at Lu Jinyu. Lu Jinyu walked over and said in a low voice, "Chief, there was news just now that an unidentified armed cargo ship forced its way to the port of the island. A few unidentified foreign men came down from the ship. I don't know what's going on at the moment, but I'm planning to go over and take a look." Chapter 1789. Mu Yaja's eyes were filled with suspicion, and his tone was filled with displeasure. "Didn't you order people to seal off this place? Why are there still people barging in?" "It's my fault. I've already sent people to guard this place, and the sea route is tightly sealed. I don't know the origin of this cargo ship. I've already sent people to stop them, but because those people are carrying weapons of mass destruction, there's been some conflict at the scene. I'm about to rush over to take a look at the situation. Mu Yaja's eyes darkened, and a gloomy expression appeared on his face. You're saying that it's an armed cargo ship that forcefully docked at the port? Yes. What other suspicious information do you have? Lu Jinyu pondered for a moment and then replied, based on the information we have, it should be a cargo ship full of military munitions. As far as I know, such cargo ships are usually used by arms dealers to transport military munitions, and they are equipped with a large number of military munitions. These people are very aggressive, and it seems like they want to barge into the venue. However, I also suspect that they might be pirates who hijacked the cargo ship. But it's just a suspicion, and it hasn't been confirmed yet. Mu Yaja's heart skipped a beat. Arms dealers were businessmen or organizations that engaged in the trade of military munitions. Generally speaking, these business groups would use shipping to transport goods from the factory to the front line of the battlefield in order to fool others. Generally speaking, shipping was a more common method of transport. It was safe and carried large quantities. Generally speaking, cargo ships would be equipped with a large number of well-trained mercenaries. This was a private island. Although it was equipped with a relatively high level of security, it would definitely not be able to gain the upper hand if they were to deal with these people. Arms dealers, that was an organization that played with the flames of war. What could be more lethal than this? But why would an armed cargo ship barge in? The abilities of these people who came were really not small. Immediately he ordered, "Go over and take a look. If there's anything, report to me immediately." I'll rush over to take a look now. Lu Jinyu rushed over as soon as he finished speaking. Yun Shirshir saw that the two of them were nervous and alert as they talked, so she couldn't help but feel worried. What's wrong? Nothing. Don't worry. However, just as he finished speaking, the rumbling sound of an armed helicopter could be heard from afar. Mu Yaja raised his head abruptly and saw a helicopter approaching the venue from the direction of the port. All the guests couldn't help but panic. Looking at the helicopter of unknown origin that suddenly appeared in the sky above their heads, no one knew what was going on, and they were faintly panicking. The strong wind created by the propeller was like a tsunami, sweeping away the flowers and trees. Yun Shirshir's skirt was also blown up by the strong wind. Mu Yaja immediately protected her behind him, handsome eyes cold, eyes vigilantly looking at the approaching plane. The helicopter slowly landed, and the cabin door was suddenly pushed open. At the cabin door, a tall and straight figure suddenly leaned out. His military windbreaker was fluttering in the wind, and his sleeves were fluttering. The man had one hand on the cabin door and the other on his hat. His casual posture could not hide his noble and arrogant demeanor. He raised his head slightly, revealing his incomparably handsome face to everyone's eyes. Chapter 1790. Mu Yaja's gaze turned cold. He was even more wary of this man's aggressiveness. Alas, when she caught sight of the man's handsome face, her breath caught in her throat and she could not make a sound for a moment. At the entrance of the helicopter, Gong Jie was dressed in a military trench coat. The sleeves of his coat fluttered in the wind, and a pair of snow-white military boots made him look even more handsome. His silver-white hair fluttered in the strong wind, constantly invading his arrogant and handsome face. The helicopter slowly made a forced landing. The wind and waves swept up sand and sand. The surrounding guests were either shocked or surprised as they gathered together and looked up at the godlike figure who seemed to have descended from the sky. Who is that? Gosh, isn't that a military helicopter? Who is that? Who is that man? He's so handsome. What a beautiful man. Look at his eyes. They're so mesmerizing. Yun Shirshir watched the helicopter descend lower and lower. She widened her eyes in disbelief until she saw that familiar and devilish face. For a moment, an inexplicable bitterness and emotion welled up in her heart. Then, she covered her mouth with her trembling hands and cried tears of joy. Xiao Jie, he's here. She thought that he wouldn't show up at her engagement party. Xiao Jie had said that the hatred of the Mu family's matricide had seeped into their bones and blood. It was impossible to get rid of it. The Gong and Mu families were irreconcilable. He would not object, but he would not attend her engagement party with the intention of giving her his blessings. Although he did not say it explicitly, she understood the meaning behind his words. Therefore, she had already mentally prepared herself to not have him at such an important moment in her life. She did not expect that he would appear. Like a god, he descended from the sky and appeared in front of her. Rumble, the helicopter's propellers whirred at high speed. A suspension ladder was suddenly lowered from the cabin's entrance. Gong Jie gracefully and nimbly descended the ladder. When he was 3 meters away from the ground, he abruptly let go of the handrail and landed suavely. With a leap, he landed steadily on the ground. Ah, that was so dangerous. Jumping down from such a high place is too scary. Everyone cried out in surprise. However, when he stood up straight, he took off the white military cap on his head and raised his head. His lips curled into an arrogant and enchanting arc. The aura that accompanied him seemed to be natural and noble. It was dangerous and domineering to the point of being unreasonable. The powerful aura instantly spread toward the crowd. It was impossible to resist it, stunning everyone at the scene. It was as if he was an innate king, causing others to involuntarily submit to him. Gong Jie quietly stood where he was. His eyes fell on Yun Shirshir and he was suddenly shocked. However, there was a flash of emotion on his face and a gentle smile appeared on his face. Thank goodness! He wasn't too late. This time, he went to sign a bill and hurriedly loaded the goods. He didn't even have the time to send the batch of munitions to the battlefield, so he hurriedly changed his route and rushed here. She wanted to arrive at the venue on the day of the engagement banquet. Along the way, the cargo ship was unlucky. It suddenly encountered a thunderstorm and had to temporarily anchor at the port for a period of time to avoid the wind and rain. However, when he looked at the time, he was afraid that he would not be able to make it. Therefore, he did not wait for the thunderstorm to pass and hurriedly set sail again. Chapter 1791. The sea route on the island was completely sealed off. He had paid a huge price to break through the blockade and finally reach the port. When he reached the port, he tried to force his way to the shore but was stopped by the island's security personnel. When Gong Jie got off the cargo ship, he was immediately stopped. Even though he didn't care about the island's security arrangements at all. He had a group of powerful mercenaries with him. It would only take him a few minutes to break through the defenses and clear a path. However, today was his sister's happiest day. He didn't want to cause too much of a commotion and didn't want to be stained with blood on such a good day. Hence, he used the cargo ship's helicopter to rush all the way to the banquet venue. Fortunately, he wasn't late. At the most important moment, he arrived just in time. At first, he had a long internal struggle about whether or not to attend this engagement banquet. However, he couldn't let go of this feud that had seeped into his blood and bones. Not coming. However, he couldn't miss such an important day for his sister. He had already missed 15 years with her. How many more 15 years could he miss? If he didn't come, his sister would definitely be sad and upset, right? Ever since he could remember, Gong Jie could be said to be fearless. Even if he respected his father from the bottom of his heart, he was never afraid of him. However, the only thing he was afraid of was her tears. He couldn't stand by and watch her be disappointed and upset. Hence he came. He put down all his grudges and hatred and appeared here to give his sister his blessings at the most important moment. Gong Jie stood upright with one hand in his trouser pocket. The windbreaker on his shoulders fluttered in the wind, elongating his shadow. Mu Yazhe narrowed his eyes and was a little suspicious of his identity. After secretly sizing him up, his gaze suddenly stopped at the armband on his windbreaker. The family seal of the Hurricane Group was engraved on the armband. Although Mu Yazhe couldn't recognize who this handsome man in front of him was, he recognized the family seal at a glance. Hurricane Group. After his mind went blank for a few seconds, his gaze suddenly returned to Su Yangyi's face. A strange suspicion instantly floated into his mind. At first, he merely swept a glance at the man's face, But when he came back to his senses and scrutinized the man's face again, he was taken aback all of a sudden. Gong Jie had a particularly beautiful face. It was indeed inappropriate to describe a man as beautiful. However, it was not inappropriate to describe him. Gong Jie's skin was fair, but his eyes were as deep as a demon's. Especially his thick black eyelashes and dark pupils, it made him look even more enchanting. His thin lips were naturally curved in a devilish arc. Even if he wasn't smiling, the curled corners of his lips gave off a devilish and unruly impression. He was dressed in a long robe, and his face was devilishly charming. His short hair was as white as snow, and his sharp eyebrows made him look even more imposing. However, whether it was the charm or the outline of his facial features, they were extremely similar to Yun Shirshi's imagination. If it wasn't for the aura, if the two of them stood together and changed into the same attire, it would be impossible to tell who was who. They were too alike. Hence, Mu Yaja couldn't help but suspect the identity of the man in front of him. Chapter 1792. However, Gong Jie didn't seem to notice Mu Yaja's silent scrutiny. Instead, he walked over to Yun Shirshir. After he landed on the ground, the helicopter slowly rose into the air. However, it wasn't in a hurry to leave. Instead, it hovered about 30 meters above the ground. From the helicopter, it looked like it was raining. Countless flower petals fluttered down. So many rose petals? But God, it's so beautiful. This feeling is as beautiful as a shower of petals. The sudden romance and surprise surprised everyone. Accompanied by the continuous exclamations, Gong Jie smiled as he slowly walked over to Yun Shirshir amidst the shower of petals. Yun Shirshir's heartbeat started to beat violently once again. In an instant, the rhythm of her heart was messed up. It wasn't until he was right in front of her that she came back to her senses. She blinked her eyes and a line of tears fell from her eyes. When Mu Yaja saw this scene, he furrowed his brows. The guess in his heart kept jumping. Hence, when Yun Shirshir walked out from behind him and walked towards Gong Jie, he actually didn't stop her. Gong Jie looked at her. It was as if in this vast world, everything in the world was overshadowed. Only she was filled with vibrant colors. Other than her, no one else could enter his eyes. He stood still in front of her. Following which, he gently reached out his hand and tucked a strand of hair that had been messed up by the north wind behind her ear. "Sister, I'm late," Gong Jie said apologetically. His eyes curved as if he was smiling innocently, yet it also seemed like he was acting coquettishly towards her. However, when he saw the tears seeping out from the corners of her eyes, his heart ached as he knitted his brows. He said helplessly, "Sister? What's wrong with you?" She was actually crying. Yun Shirshir pursed her lips and choked out in grievance, "I thought that I wouldn't see you. I thought you wouldn't be willing to come. Little fool. How could I not come to your engagement ceremony? But you didn't pick up my calls. I called you, but I was told that you weren't in the service area. I thought you were deliberately avoiding me." The more Yun Shirshir spoke, the more aggrieved she felt. Tears welled up in her eyes. Seeing this, Gong Jie was even more at a loss. He hurriedly tried to stop her tears. His sister had loved to cry since she was young. In front of outsiders, she always liked to play the hero. Although she looked strong, her heart was extremely weak. When he heard that she had called him and he was not in the service area, he did not know whether to laugh or cry. "Sis, if you call my number, it will automatically cut off the signal after I leave the country. When I'm on business trips, I always use a satellite phone. So," Gong Jie smiled helplessly, his handsome eyebrows frowning weakly, but his eyes revealed indulgence and doting. "But look, who is the person standing in front of you now?" "Little Jie, so here I am. Although I'm a little late, I'm not too late. I didn't miss your most important moment." As Gong Jie spoke, he cupped her face gently and comforted her softly. "So, don't cry, okay? My dear sister, you're the most beautiful when you smile. Today is such an important day. It's not good to cry in front of so many people." Chapter 1793. As Gong Jie spoke, he gently cupped her face and softly coaxed her. "So, don't cry, okay? My dear sister, You're the most beautiful when you smile. Today is such an important day. It's not good to cry in front of so many people. A 24-year-old handsome man was actually trying his best to act cute in front of her, trying his best to make her laugh. Xianxia instantly broke into laughter and gently wiped away the moisture at the corner of her eyes. Seeing this, Gong Jie's gaze softened. That's a good girl. Sister is the most beautiful when she smiles. I love the way you smile the most. Xianxia helplessly said, Shao Jie, stop fooling around. Why do I feel like you're coaxing a child? What do you mean coaxing a child? Gong Jie innocently pursed his lips and then curled his lips. I'm coaxing my little princess. Then he suddenly gently lifted her hand, raised it, nodded, and planted a kiss on the back of her hand. He gave her a mysterious wink and coaxed her, Sister, I'll cast a spell for you. Do you want to see it? Xianxia turned around to look at Wuxia, only to see him standing there expressionlessly. However, there wasn't much enmity in his eyes towards Gong Jie. She calmed down, and when she looked back, she curiously widened her eyes. What spell? Close your eyes. Gong Jie immediately requested childishly. Xianxia was puzzled. Close my eyes? What are you trying to do? Close, close, close. If you don't close your eyes, how can I cast a spell? Gong Jie acted like a child and said coquettishly. Xianxia couldn't argue with him and agreed a few times before obediently closing her eyes. She really closed her eyes tightly, so she couldn't see anything. However, after a while, she inexplicably felt a weight on her wrist, as if there was a touch of coldness on her skin. She was a little surprised and her eyelids moved. Gong Jie immediately said, No peeking. Xianxia obediently closed her eyes again. He didn't even dare to open his eyes secretly. After a long time, Gong Jie said gently, All right, open your eyes. Xianxia slowly opened her eyes. However, the moment she opened her eyes, a dazzling light leaped into her eyes. She was immediately attracted by this dazzling light. When she opened her eyes, she saw that a flower had been placed on her wrist. However, this flower was different from the others. Under the 3 blood-colored roses, there was a dazzling diamond. She didn't notice it at first glance because this diamond was embedded in the petals. Moreover, like a rose, its entire body was shining with a deep red. The blood-red resplendent diamond and the rose petals complemented each other. When she closed her eyes earlier, she suddenly felt her hands sink. It was because the resplendent diamond weighed at least 3 carats. Blood diamond? That was extremely rare and precious. A 1-carat blood diamond was already extremely precious. A 3-carat blood diamond could be described as priceless. Don't look down on this 3-carat diamond. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that it was a priceless treasure. In a London auction, a 0.9-carat blood diamond was auctioned for a sky-high price of 500 million. Chapter 1794. Xianxia's eyes widened in shock. She was so stunned that she could not speak. She reached out and gently stroked the diamond's surface. She could tell that the diamond had just been processed. The cut surface was a little blunt, so it was obvious that it had just been cut. Xianxia was so touched that she couldn't speak. She didn't know where the diamond came from. Do you like it? Gong Jie looked at her nervously, afraid that she would say, Don't like it, and he wouldn't know what to do. This gift was part of the Gong family's collection. Back then, when his father was selling arms in the Middle East, he sold a batch of weapons to a local terrorist organization. The terrorist organization couldn't come up with enough US dollars, so they gave him a blood diamond as a reward. The terrorist leader didn't recognize the treasure, but that didn't mean that Gong Xiaoying didn't recognize it. This blood diamond couldn't be compared to a normal diamond. After he brought it back, he kept it as a treasure. This blood diamond was rare and precious. In fact, this blood diamond was 4 carats. After carving it, it was reduced to 3 carats. There was no other 4-carat blood diamond in the world. Even if there was one, it hadn't appeared yet. Before the second one appeared, the blood diamond in Xianxia's hand was the real king of diamonds. Gong Jie took the blood diamond that his father had carefully collected from Zhenbao Pavilion and ordered the designer to design and carve it overnight. Finally, on the way here, He used fresh rose petals to decorate the blood diamond into a bracelet so that he could personally wear the bracelet on her wrist. Xianxia was so touched that she couldn't speak. Just by looking at the design of the blood diamond, she knew that this guy had spent a lot of effort on it. I like it a lot. Xianxia nodded. The satisfaction on her face wasn't fake at all. She sincerely expressed her love for it. She raised her head and said with a smile, "Actually, the fact that you're here is the best gift you can give me. Nothing else is as important as you coming. I definitely won't miss sister's engagement. Not only that, I won't miss any important occasions in the future." He spoke seriously and there was no trace of a joke on his face. Instead, it was extremely sincere. "However, I have another reason for coming here." As Gong Jie spoke, he suddenly raised his cold gaze and looked at the man behind Xianxia. He looked at Wuxia, but his gaze was no longer as gentle and docile as it was when he faced Xianxia. Instead, it was piercingly cold and sharp. It was cold, scrutinizing, and directly pressuring. Wuxia also looked at him without any intention of backing down. Two pairs of eyes met in midair. Invisible sparks flew from the collision, like a smokeless war. At that time, the two men looked at each other, but it was more like a battle between kings. Their eyes met, but it was more like a confrontation. The collision of the two men's auras created a strong magnetic field that almost shook the earth. In the end, Gong Jie was the first to break the strange silence with a smile. "Wuxia, do you know who I am?" If I'm not wrong, Wuxia's voice paused slightly, but his eyes were still cold. Hurricane Group. Chapter 1795. "Oh, I'm sorry, but you guessed wrong." Gong Jie, on the other hand, had a look of pity on his face as he shook his finger. While Wuxia was puzzled, Gong Jie suddenly reached out and hugged Xianxia's shoulder. He said to him mischievously, "I'm not here today as a member of Hurricane Group. Instead, I'm here as my sister's younger brother to attend this engagement ceremony." The corner of Wuxia's eyes twitched fiercely. However, he heard Gong Jie say in a lazy tone, "Ayaya, let me think. Actually, you should call me brother-in-law, right?" Xianxia was instantly amused by his mischievous tone. Wuxia's expression became even more strange. Could he imagine an enemy who had always been on the opposite side smiling and asking him to call him brother-in-law? Even though he was mentally prepared for Gong Jie to be Xianxia's younger brother, he was still caught off guard. Although the siblings looked similar, if not for their different attire, height, and dressing, it would be difficult to tell who was who. However, Gong Jie calling him brother-in-law still confused a certain man. Xianxia said helplessly, "Shao Jie, sister. I didn't say anything wrong." Gong Jie said coquettishly, "I'm your younger brother. Since that's the case, shouldn't he call me brother-in-law?" Xianxia raised both hands and compromised. Okay. Yes, you're right. He should call you brother-in-law." Gong Jie had an "I knew it" expression. Then he raised his chin at Wuxia in an incomparably calm manner. As if out of some kind of provocation, he grinned and said, "Since my sister has said so, shouldn't you call me brother-in-law?" "Sure." Wuxia also smiled elegantly. Then he raised his eyebrows in a somewhat provocative manner and said, "But before that, shouldn't you call me brother-in-law?" Half a second after he said that, Gong Jie smiled and blurted out, "Brother-in-law." Wuxia, Gong Jie laughed in his heart. It wasn't difficult for him to call him brother-in-law. Since he had come here, he had already prepared himself mentally. Even though he was well aware of the identity of the man in front of him, and that the blood of the person he hated the most flowed in his veins, he was willing to temporarily bury the hatchet for his sister. At least for now, he could let go of all hatred and face it calmly. Wuxia gritted his teeth and unwillingly snorted. "Brother-in-law." Gong Jie seemed to be deliberately making things difficult for him as he said faintly, "Brother-in-law, you don't seem to want to acknowledge me as your brother-in-law." Wuxia, but it's okay. This isn't the main point of my visit." Gong Jie paused. Suddenly, he let go of Xianxia's shoulder and strode toward him. He only stopped when he was standing in front of Wuxia. The two men faced each other. They had the same height and aura. When they confronted each other, they were evenly matched. Gong Jie looked at Mu Yaja coldly. He narrowed his eyes and his gaze suddenly turned cold. He said in a low voice that Yun Shirshir couldn't hear clearly, "I'm here to warn you. If you dare to bully my sister and let her suffer even the slightest grievance, I'll destroy your Mu group." Chapter 1796. He didn't hear anything else, but the words, "flatten the Mu group," were loud and clear, and he heard it clearly. A question popped up in Jiang Shen's mind. Who is this guy? What an arrogant tone. Flatten Mu Corporation? What kind of courage does he have to make such a threat in front of boss? Is he here to cause trouble for the engagement ceremony? Jiang Shen walked forward with a cold expression, but Mu Yaja raised his hand to stop him. Boss? Jiang Shen was puzzled, but he didn't know why Mu Yaja stopped him. Lu Jinyu, who had rushed over, was also shocked to see this scene. He didn't hear what kind of provocation Gong Jie had said, but just by looking at his unfriendly attitude, he could tell that he had come with ill intentions. Mu Yaja's face darkened slightly, but he didn't say a word. Gong Jie stared at him like a tiger watching its prey, like a lion, defending his sister's happiness. Yun Shirshir was marrying this man. Sure, he was willing to believe in his sister's judgment and choice. As her younger brother, even if he was worried, he had no right to interfere. However, his sister's happiness was the only bottom line that could not be crossed. His principle was to defend his sister's happiness. Just like how Yu had questioned Mu Yaja back then, what kind of reason did a person rely on to become stronger? His answer was the same as Yu's. That was to protect the person he loved. Yun Shirshir was the person he loved the most. In order to protect her happiness, he naturally wouldn't shirk his responsibility. Gong Jie stared at him silently and didn't say a word. He was waiting to see how Mu Yaja would respond. After a long period of dead silence, as if a century had passed, Mu Yaja suddenly smiled and said, "Flatten Mu Corporation?" Gong Jie raised his eyebrows and didn't say anything. However, the emotion in his eyes was a silent warning. Since he could say such words, it meant that he could do what he said. Mu Yaja didn't have much of an expression on his face. He just faintly expressed his regret. "I'm sorry. I don't think you'll have the chance." After he finished speaking, his lips curled into a smile, but he was extremely conceited. Since he had decided to marry her, he would pamper her for the rest of her life. Regardless of birth, old age, sickness or death, regardless of wealth or wealth. Similarly, cherishing this woman was his bottom line as her husband. "I don't need you to remind me of that." When Gong Jie heard this, he smiled and raised his eyebrows. Obviously, he was very satisfied with his response. "That's the best." Yun Shirshir looked over curiously. She couldn't understand the invisible confrontation between the two men. Gong Jie turned and looked at her. Then he smiled and naturally hooked his arm around Mu Yaja's shoulder. "I just had a friendly conversation with my brother-in-law." Mu Yaja was speechless. "Friendly?" He said, "Flatten Mu Corporation, in a friendly manner?" The corners of Mu Yaja's eyes twitched. Yun Shirshir obviously didn't believe him. She said suspiciously, "But I saw your expression just now. You looked very fierce." Gong Jie said truthfully, "Yes. Just now, I was threatening my dear brother-in-law. If he doesn't treat you well, I'll flatten Mu Corporation." Yun Shirshir was stunned for a moment. She thought that he was joking and immediately said, "Shao Jie, stop fooling around." Chapter 1797. Yun Shirshir didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "With a clown like you backing me up, your brother-in-law definitely won't dare to bully me. But isn't it a little too exaggerated to say that you'll wipe out the Mu group? Although I know you're joking, your brother-in-law might think that you're a terrorist if he doesn't know." The corners of his lips twitched violently as he felt a pang of guilt. His words came true. He really panicked. "My dear sister, how did you know that your brother is a terrorist? Could it be the legendary telepathy?" Gong Jie immediately dispelled his doubts. She must be joking. He hid his identity so well. How could she know that he was a terrorist? But strictly speaking, he wasn't a real terrorist. He was just a little more awesome than terrorists, just a level higher. It could be said that if the hurricane group stopped the large-scale weapons shipments to the Middle East, it could be said that more than half of the world's terrorists could close down at home and have nothing to do. As the hurricane group that dominated the world's war situation, how could terrorists compete with it? Gong Jie immediately changed the topic coquettishly. What? Sister, you actually said that your brother is like a terrorist. I'm so sad. Yun Shirshir smiled helplessly. Who asked you to speak like a terrorist? Gong Jie was speechless. He was used to speaking like this and couldn't change it. But sister was biased. She was obviously protecting his brother-in-law. He felt so wronged. Gong Jie glared at Mu Yaja angrily. Mu Yaja felt a murderous gaze on him. When he looked back, he met Gong Jie's resentful gaze. The two men's gazes met again in midair and there was a burst of electromagnetic sparks. Mu Yaja glanced at Gong Jie and then smiled. He said in a low voice, "Don't worry, I know that my brother-in-law is joking. He said that because he's afraid that you'll be wronged, so I won't take it seriously." Although he said that, a certain man couldn't help but silently criticize in his heart. To be honest, he was actually quite curious. Although the man in front of him was young, his tone was arrogant and he actually dared to threaten him. Actually, he really wanted to see for himself what kind of means and capabilities this man had to be able to flatten the Mu group overnight. He knew this man's identity. He was from the Hurricane group and had extraordinary capabilities. But the Mu group couldn't be wiped out by the Hurricane group overnight. Did he think that the Mu group was weak? How could they be so weak that they couldn't even withstand a single blow? Jiang Shen and Lu Jinyu were perplexed. They exchanged glances, but neither of them knew what was going on. Brother-in-law? Sister? Brother-in-law? They were totally to be confused. What was going on right now? Up to Gong Jie and Jiang were similar? Jiang to Yun, Gong Jie, to look. Then to Yun's. To Toot. To Jiang, he to look. His biological siblings? Lu Jinyu pointed at Gong Jie in surprise. Could it be that this man who appeared out of nowhere is sister-in-law's brother? Yun Shirshir smiled awkwardly. Yes, he's my brother. What's wrong? We do look alike. Yun Shirshir explained, we're twins, so it's normal that we look alike. Chapter 1798. Twins? Then they were siblings. Jiang Shen was confused. He suddenly interrupted, cleared his throat, and pointed at the helicopter hovering in the sky. Moreover, a burly mercenary was standing at the cabin door, scattering flower petals like a celestial maiden. He asked quietly, "Whose helicopter is this?" Gong Jie said calmly, "It's mine." "Yours?" Jiang Shen pondered for a moment. Then he suddenly thought of something. Then he asked quietly, "In that case, the armed cargo ship that forcefully broke through the blockade and docked at the port is also yours?" "It's mine." Gong Jie broke out in cold sweat and felt guilty. Then, he said righteously, "But what do you mean by an armed cargo ship? It's obviously an ordinary cruise ship. Don't talk nonsense." "An ordinary cruise ship?" Jiang Shen narrowed his eyes suspiciously and sized him up. *CK. Did he really think he was retarded? How could he not tell a cruise ship from a cargo ship? Moreover, who would stuff hundreds of containers full of firearms on a cruise ship? Also, how could an ordinary cruise ship forcefully break through the blockade of the route and dock at the port? Moreover, who had seen a cruise ship equipped with long-range missiles and large-scale cannons? Who had seen it before? Who had seen it before? This guy was lying through his teeth. Jiang Shen said, "Sister-in-law, your brother can't be. He was probably an arms dealer." Gong Jie snorted coldly. "Today is my sister's big day. That's why I came all the way here." Yun Shirshir also asked suspiciously, "Shao Jie, is this cruise ship yours?" Gong Jie was stunned for a moment, then said, "It's mine." Yun Shirshir asked again, "What do you do for a living?" "I'm a businessman. I have a few private ships to carry goods." Jiang Shen sneered silently in his heart. He was a businessman. There was nothing wrong with that. He was just an unscrupulous businessman. When Yu and Xiao Yichen arrived, they saw Gong Jie in a trench coat standing beside Yun Shirshir from afar. The corners of their eyes twitched and their hearts skipped a beat. Why did this guy rush over? How did he get here? Suddenly he realized that he had heard that an armed cargo ship had broken through the blockade and was anchored at the private port of the island. Could it be that this was his doing? Yu rubbed her forehead helplessly. Did this uncle of hers have to be so high profile? Upon hearing the commotion, Yun Yeqing and Yun Yeho walked out as well. According to the procedure, the next step would be for Yun Yeqing to hold her hand and hand it over to Mu Yaja. For this reason, he deliberately wore a well-ironed suit. Although he was slightly older and had experienced many changes in the past few years, he still deliberately dressed himself up on such a rare occasion. He looked very presentable. However, when he walked out, he saw Yun Xianxia standing together with an unfamiliar yet familiar man. He was immediately confused. The reason why he said he was unfamiliar was because he had never seen this man before. He said he was familiar because he looked similar to Yun Xianxia, especially that pair of eyes. It was as if they were cast from the same mold. This is? Chapter 1799. Gong Jie turned around and saw Yun Yeqing in a suit. Upon hearing Yun Xianxia's introduction, he was stunned for a moment and did not react in time. Father! Suddenly, he came back to his senses and understood that this so-called father was probably referring to her adoptive father. Yun Xianxia continued, when I was 9 years old, he was the one who brought me back to the Yun family and adopted me at the welfare center. Although he's my adoptive father, he's always treated me like his own. Even though I'm not his biological father, he's never mistreated me in any way. In my heart, he's my father. Xiao Jie, you should call him uncle? Gong Jie nodded obediently at his mother's words. Following her wishes, he greeted the man meekly, Hello, uncle. He was used to being high and mighty. Unless it was in front of his father, he would never bow his head to anyone. However, this ordinary man in front of him was different. He was his sister's adoptive father. Since she said that he had always treated her like his own all these years, then he would be grateful to anyone who treated his sister well. After all, this man had taken over the role of a father to take care of his sister all these years. At least, he had saved her from being homeless. Just based on this point alone, he acknowledged it. Thus, this uncle was a sincere greeting from the bottom of his heart. Mu Yaja, who was standing at the side, was silent. This Gong Jie might seem arrogant and unruly on the surface, like a young and aggressive leopard, but in front of Yun Xianxia, he was as docile and adorable as a little lamb. This contrast, it was simply too much. Yu's lips twitched as well. This uncle of his was a classic sisterkun. He would do whatever his mommy said and would never refute her. He was extremely docile. He was a little uncomfortable. Recalling Gong Jie's domineering and unruly style on a daily basis, and then looking at this man who was like a little lamb right now, the little lad could not help feeling flustered. Xiao Yichen, who was standing at the side, commented quietly, This man looks so much like mommy. Yu said, You should call this man uncle. Uncle? Xiao Yichen was puzzled. Idiot. Because he's mommy's younger brother. Mommy has a younger brother? And they're twins. Twins. Isn't that the same as us? Xiao Yichen then said, This man is quite handsome. Good genes, nothing can be done about it. Yun Yeqing looked at the Gong Jie and smiled courteously. He then rubbed his hands nervously and looked at Yun Xianxia inquiringly. Xianxia, Dad, this is my little brother. When I was 9 years old, I was separated from him because of a car accident. I haven't heard from you for 15 years, but the heavens are kind enough to let us meet again. Yun Xianxia replied, but her face was filled with joy. She did not have the chance to introduce her father to Xiao Jie because she was worried that he would not approve of him. Alas, it turned out that her worries were unnecessary. Yun Yeqing chuckled when he heard that. Sure. Great. This means that we're destined to be siblings. The car accident you're talking about? Yun Xianxia said helplessly, I'll go back and explain it to you later. It's complicated. Chapter 1800. However, this man's identity was worth investigating. Lu Jinyu took another look at Gong Jie and was stunned for a few seconds when he caught sight of the epaulets on the latter's windbreaker. The symbol of this epaulet was very familiar. Hurricane Group? Lu Jinyu's face turned pale when he realized what was going on. Hurricane Group, wasn't that the #1 military group that caused the entire world to tremble in fear? It was said that they were so powerful that they could make the world tremble with a stomp of their feet. Their influence was terrifying. The Mu Group's power was obvious to all in the world. If one had to describe it, the world's financial system would fall into a state of depression with just a few sneezes from the Mu Group. However, the Hurricane Group was different. The Hurricane Group was a powerful family that controlled the world's war. It could be said that 70% of the world's weapons came from the Hurricane Group's military factories. The Gong family's every move was directly related to the direction of the war. All the wars in the world ended because of them, and they also started because of them. The world's financial system was in crisis, but the war never stopped. It could be said that the Hurricane Group was growing stronger and stronger, and it was a family that was feared by many. Lu Jinyu couldn't help but feel confused. What? Sister-in-law's younger brother was actually from the Hurricane Group. Who exactly was he? Judging from his momentum, he seemed to be of an extraordinary status. Could he be a core member of the Gong family? Jiang Shen whispered, Jinyu, could this be someone from the Hurricane Group? Lu Jinyu said gloomily, judging from his stance, it can't be wrong. It seems like he's from the Gong family. In that case, sister-in-law's maternal family is also very powerful. But sister-in-law doesn't seem to know her younger brother's identity. It's a little strange. Boss is in trouble. He thought that he had married a little white rabbit, but it turns out that this little white rabbit has a group of lions behind her. Lu Jinyu suddenly mourned for Mu Yaja for a few seconds and then said, if sister-in-law is from the Gong family, then her maternal family is indeed difficult to deal with. Jiang Shen's heart also ached for Mu Yaja as he observed a few seconds of silence. His heart ached for his boss for a second. Mu Yaja looked at them coldly, but he didn't know what these two fellows were silently criticizing him about. He glared at Zhang Xian as a warning. Lu Jinyu and Jiang Shen cleared their throats in unison, feeling a little awkward. He told Yun Shishir, it's getting late. Since everyone is here, it's time to start the ceremony. Then he walked over and wanted to hold Yun Shishir's hand. Gong Jie said politely, hello, uncle. I have something to discuss with you. Yun Yeqing was slightly unaccustomed to his gentleness, so he asked politely, what's the matter? Gong Jie lowered his head and glanced at Yun Shishir beside him. Then he smiled gently and asked, can I take my sister's place at the engagement ceremony today? This? Gong Jie clasped his hands together like a child. Please, please. This is a wish that I've been wanting to fulfill for the past 15 years. I hope that you can fulfill it for me. The reason why he had risked his life to rush all the way here at all costs was so that he could hold Yun Shishir's hand and walk through the ceremony with her. This was also his wish. Chapter 1801. Gong Jie then sought his sister's opinion. Sis, can I? I want to hold your arm as we enter the venue. Of course. Yun Yeqing agreed. Great, great. Since you're her brother, it's Shishir's wish for you to hold Shishir's arm as she enters the venue on such a special day. Of course, I'm happy for you. Thank you, uncle. Gong Jie smiled as happily as a child. He suddenly thought of something and took out his walkie-talkie to give an order. Withdraw the helicopter and don't disturb the order of the venue. Everyone, stay on the ship and listen to my orders. Don't move without my permission. Roger, sir. Gong Jie put away the walkie-talkie and gently held Yun Shishir's soft hand. He smiled at her. Sis, let's go. Okay. Gong Jie then led her slowly down the red carpet. Lu Jinyu and Jiang Shen then hurriedly immersed themselves in the ceremony. When Gong Jie and Yun Shishir appeared at the end of the red carpet, the sacred music played again. All the guests in their seats stood up in unison and looked in their direction. They were either looking at the bride-to-be with anticipation or blessing. Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen followed behind obediently. The two little guys walked up to Yun Shishir and silently lifted the hem of her gown that was spread out on the floor. A group of cute little flower girls standing in 2 rows walked up with flower baskets in their hands. The flower baskets were filled with fresh and tender rose petals. They wore pink gauze dresses and had small and cute angel wings on their backs. They were as cute as angels, just like the incarnation of Cupid, the god of love. The flower girls walked on both sides. Before the engagement ceremony, these cute little Lolas had undergone some training. Hence, when Xianxia and Gong Jie appeared on the red carpet, they grabbed the petals in their baskets and sprinkled them over Xiaxia's head. Some of the flower girls were especially pretty and adorable. They had blonde hair, blue eyes, deep-set brows, and exquisite European features. Some of the flower girls were the guests' children. They had black hair and amber eyes, but after dressing up, they were extremely beautiful. However, gradually, these flower girls saw Yu and Xiaoyichen behind Xianxia. They curiously surrounded them and asked in their childish voices, "What's your name?" Yu pouted and ignored them. She proudly turned her face to the side. Those little flower girls, however, persevered and went to the other side. While scattering petals, they smiled and said, "Can we be friends?" Yu proudly ignored them. Xiaoyichen, however, liked to play with girls. Hence, he said, "His name is Yu." Yu glared at him. "Why did you betray me? Idiot Yu, how can you bear to reject such a cute girl?" Xiaoyichen lectured in all seriousness. "Mommy said that you have to be gentle with girls." Yu was speechless. When the guests saw these adorable children interacting so innocently and heard Xiaoyichen sternly say, "You have to be gentle with girls," they were amused. "These little guys are so adorable." That's right. These two children are so handsome. Look at them. They're wearing suits and look as elegant as gentlemen. Chapter 1802. When Xianxia appeared in front of all the guests in her splendid attire, they were deeply impressed by her beauty. She's too beautiful. Many of the guests had many hazy fantasies about the bride on their way here. Now that they saw it with their own eyes, they were deeply moved. Perhaps, strictly speaking, Xianxia was not the most beautiful bride they had ever seen, but she was the most elegant woman. Some people were beautiful, but this beauty was empty and soulless, like a porcelain doll that had a surface but no soul. Xiaxia's beauty, however, was not limited to the surface. It was a beauty that bloomed from the inside out. Her luxurious gown was like a blooming rose. The ingenious design, not to mention the priceless jewelry on her body, accentuated her otherworldly beauty. Because of her presence, the entire venue became dreamy and illusory, like a fairyland. Her beauty made everyone gasp in admiration. Someone noticed the bouquet on Xiaxia's hand. Even from afar, one could see the dazzling blood diamond. Do you see the diamond on the bride-to-be's hand? It's so beautiful. It's as red as blood. It's so mesmerizing. That's a blood diamond. It's very rare. Even a carat of it is very expensive. It's basically something that can only be found by chance. This small one is priceless. Blood diamonds are the noblest among diamonds. Also, this diamond doesn't look small. It's about 3 carats. The craftsmanship of the carving is uncanny. It looks like the raw stone should be even bigger. What extravagance! Someone with sharp eyes was able to estimate the weight of the diamond at a glance. Yun Qingmiao and Yun Qinli were also stunned by Xiaxia's expensive outfit. At first, they snorted disdainfully when they saw Xiaxia's gown. They thought to themselves, marrying into a rich family is indeed different. Not to mention his outfit, just the accessories on his body alone would be enough to blind them. His heart was filled with envy and jealousy. However, it was out of his reach. However, when they noticed the bouquet on Xiaxia's wrist, their eyes almost popped out of their sockets. They did not know how precious a blood diamond was. In comparison, this dazzling diamond was dazzling and mesmerizing. Which girl did not like diamonds? There was no way they could resist diamonds. Who could be as lucky as Xiaxia to be doted on by everyone? Therefore, most people could only look at her in envy. When Yun Qingmiao saw the man holding Xiaxia's arm, her eyes widened in shock and amazement. "Qinli, look at the man beside Xiaxia, he's so handsome. He's better looking than many celebrities on TV." "I don't think so. I think brother-in-law is more handsome than him." Although Yun Qinli said this, She still looked at him with admiration. But Brother Mu is already taken. You'd better stop thinking about it. This man looks quite similar to Xianxia. Xiang Yu suddenly said from the side. Yun Qingmiao was surprised. She did a close comparison and found that the man looked very similar to Yun Xianxia. She had never heard of such a person before, though. Chapter 1803. Yun Qingmiao chimed in. Judging from his attire, he should be a wealthy and respectable figure. Perhaps he's also a big shot with a powerful background. Yun Qinli was a little jealous, so much so that the way she looked at Yun Xianxia changed. Indeed, one could not compare with another. She envied Yun Xianxia's good fortune. Initially, she was jealous that she had the opportunity to go to university, had a high academic qualification, and was born in the city. She was like a rich young lady who lived a life of luxury and did not have to worry about food and clothing. Later, when she met Yun Xianxia's fiancé, she muttered to herself how she had met such a good man. He had an extraordinary background, a respectable family background, and a handsome face. She could not figure it out. How could she have met so many lucky people? In Yun Qinli's heart, Yun Xianxia was like a princess who had been spoiled by the heavens. With so much love on her, she did not have to worry about living an ignoble life. Now, however, it was only at the engagement ceremony that she was truly defeated. Yun Qinli could no longer suppress the sense of defeat in her heart. Feeling unbalanced, she bit her lip and kept looking at the backs of Yun Xianxia and Gong Jie. Under everyone's gaze, Gong Jie held Yun Xianxia's arm as they walked to the flower arch. Then, they stopped in their tracks and stood there with a smile. Lu Jinyu walked over in a formal suit. He was in charge of this engagement banquet. As the MC of Mu Yaja's engagement banquet, he naturally felt honored. Therefore, he had gone through the script several times until Mu Yaja was satisfied with it. In many weddings, the opening speech was very emotional, but if it was too emotional, it would inevitably appear a little pretentious. With the microphone in hand, Lu Jinyu's concise and humorous opening speech pushed the atmosphere in the venue to a climax, driving the guests' emotions to a high. As a key figure in Xinyu Financial Corporation's board meetings, Lu Jinyu naturally did not have stage fright or shyness, but he could not help but feel a little nervous before going on stage. After all, it was different from the past. Today, he was going to make an opening speech. It was Big Boss's engagement party. He would be lying if he said that he wasn't nervous. If he messed up, his boss would definitely not let him off. Not only would his bonus be deducted, but he would also have to pay for his marriage. Therefore, he attached great importance to it. But when he went up on stage, he quickly blended into the happy and warm atmosphere. With excitement in his heart, he gradually unfolded the lines that he had memorized overnight. Yun Xianxia held onto Gong Jie's arm. From the beginning to the end, her smile was gentle. Her gentleness was infectious and made people feel exceptionally warm. The atmosphere at the scene gradually increased. Lu Jinyu smiled and said, "Next, I would like to invite all distinguished guests to witness this most sacred moment together. Let's welcome our groom-to-be." Ceremonial music sounded. Under Yun Xianxia's smiling gaze, Mu Yaja slowly walked towards her with flowers in his hands, welcomed by a group of little flower girls. At this moment, Yun Xianxia suddenly became uncontrollably nervous. So much so that Gong Jie, who was standing beside her, could feel her extremely stiff hands. "Xiao Jie, what should I do?" "I'm a little nervous," she said secretly, but her face was red and she had some difficulty breathing. Gong Jie did not know whether to laugh or cry. He said, "Why are you nervous? Are you afraid that the groom-to-be will run away at the last minute?" Chapter 1804. "All right, be good. Don't be nervous," he said gently as he patted the back of her hand to comfort her. It was like a form of encouragement, as though he was telling her not to be nervous because he was here. Yun Xianxia looked up and exchanged glances with him. She took a deep breath, and only then did she feel less nervous. In the blink of an eye, Mu Yaja was already in front of her. All the guests stood up and applauded. His group of brothers stood at the side excitedly and whistled. They were obviously very excited. Mu Yaja turned slightly and put a finger to his lips, indicating for everyone to keep quiet. Everyone quietened down in an instant. He turned around and looked at her. His gaze was deep and gentle as he said, "Do you know? I've been waiting for you for 28 years for this moment." Xianxia was stunned and looked at him in disbelief. Gong Jie looked at him silently, but his lips curved slightly and he did not say anything. Mu Yaja's thin lips curved into a charming smile, but he asked gently, "Do you believe in love at first sight?" Xianxia pursed her lips and nodded. Her eyes were a little hot. "I believe in it." She had always believed that love at first sight was a fated encounter. "At first, I didn't believe in it," Mu Yaja continued, "but when I met you, I felt that you belonged to me. Luckily, it wasn't too late to meet you. I wasn't late." Xianxia was so shocked that she almost suffocated. He rarely said words of love, but today, in front of everyone, he actually said such words of love that made one's heart skip a beat. Xianxia's face turned red, but her eyes were slightly moist because of it. Mu Yaja said slowly, "Thank you for making me believe in fate." As soon as he said that, he handed her the bouquet in his hand. Xianxia held the bouquet shyly. The next second, Mu Yaja hugged her shoulders affectionately and kissed her delicate red lips tenderly. The guests below the stage were also touched and clapped their hands. Some were so touched that their eyes were wet. The most beautiful love might not be met in the most beautiful years, but it was the company of holding hands for the longest time. It was the most beautiful thing to have until the end. At this moment, Gong Jie quietly let go of his hand and stepped down from the stage. He stood by the side and quietly watched the tender scene on the stage, his gaze gradually deepened. At this moment, he put aside all the feuds and resentment, and offered his most sincere blessings for the person he loved deep in his heart. Sister will be happy. As long as she could be happy, he would not regret his decision no matter what. After a short moment of tenderness, Lu Jinyu walked up to the stage and said mysteriously to the guests, "Let's invite our honorable little guest to perform a special performance for everyone." Xiao Yichen walked up to the stage and then walked to the center of the stage. He stood between Mu Yaja and Xianxia and suddenly took out a small magic wand. "Next, I'm going to perform a magic trick for everyone." "What magic trick?" Lu Jinyu pretended to be mysterious. Xiao Yichen, however, learned from Yu Yu's arrogance and snorted coldly. "You'll know when I perform it." The guests roared with laughter. They all thought that this little guy, who was as serious as a little adult, was really too adorable. He was pretending to be mysterious. Chapter 1805. The little guy suddenly waved his hands in the air to the music in the hall. He closed his eyes and looked very stylish. He was imitating the world's top magician, as if he was going to perform a mysterious magic trick. However, after waving his hands for a long time, nothing happened. Mu Yaja had no idea that there would be such a trick during the ceremony. He looked confused. Xianxia's eyes widened in curiosity as she waited to see what the little lad was up to. Yu, who was standing at the side, fell silent. What kind of clown was this guy trying to pull on stage? Lu Jinyu urged, "Did you conjure anything?" Seeing that nothing happened, Xiao Yichen got a little anxious. His face flushed red as he said, "Don't be anxious. I'm still brewing." As soon as he said that, the guests below the stage burst into laughter again. They were amused by the child's cuteness and playfulness. "This child is so adorable." Yu Yu raised his eyebrows. Playfulness? In his opinion, Mu Yichen was a clown. What kind of trick was he up to? Mu Yichen waved it around for a long time, but there was still no movement from it. The guests below the stage burst into laughter again. Mu Yichen suddenly felt uneasy and asked Lu Jinyu for help. "Uncle Jinyu, what's going on? This isn't how the script was written." However, his voice wasn't soft, and everyone below the stage heard him clearly. This time, he was exposed. Xianxia snorted and burst into laughter. Mu Yaja and Yu Yu held their foreheads in tacit understanding, clearly feeling helpless. However, Lu Jinyu said in all seriousness, "Have you forgotten the magic trick that I taught you yesterday?" "That's right. This is the trick." "Little fool, Uncle Jinyu will teach you again." As he spoke, Lu Jinyu squatted down and held his little hands. He slowly gestured in the air. Within a few seconds, A flock of snow-white pigeons suddenly flew over from not far away. They circled the ceiling of the venue before flapping their wings and flying away. Xiao Yichen's eyes lit up. This sudden and magical scene surprised all the guests present. However, what was even more surprising was that there was actually a nimble pigeon flying straight towards Mu Yichen. The little fellow immediately stretched out his hand, and the pigeon nimbly landed on his finger, standing steadily on his hand. Everyone looked over and saw that there was a rose in the pigeon's mouth. Under the rose's flower path, there were 2 exquisite and small boxes. Mu Yichen smiled and wanted to take the box from its little mouth. Unexpectedly, the pigeon had a little temper and turned its head away, refusing to give it to him. Mu Yichen panicked and reached out to grab it. Goo! He was pecked by the proud pigeon. Wah! Mu Yichen looked angry. This pigeon must have been transformed by Yu Yu. Yu Yu had been implicated even when he was lying down. Mu Yichen tried to take it again, but the pigeon pecked his little pink hand again. Mu Yichen looked aggrieved and pursed his lips unhappily. Even a pigeon is bullying me? Everyone was amused by the clown's antics. Even Yun Shirshir couldn't be bothered to be reserved. She immediately broke into laughter. Little fool! Yu muttered. She ran onto the stage and flicked Mu Yichen's little head. How stupid! You can't even handle a little pigeon. Xiao Yichen felt even more aggrieved.